Welcome everyone to Comics from the Multiverse, episode 229. I am Peter, and joining me, unfortunately, is Connor.
Yep, still not getting rid of me, sorry.
As a DC Comics podcast, every week we get together, we talk about DC Comics we've read. Coming up on this week's show, we have Dark Knight's Death Metal, The Multiverse Who Laughs issue 1, Wonder Woman 767, The Flash 766, Suicide Squad issue 11, Action Comics 1027, Justice League Dark 28, Batman Superman 14 for the new books, and then we both have a Patreon book to talk about. Although technically one of the new books is also something that Connor has to do for Patreon. But more on that and a little bit later. You may be noticing the absence of the other history of the DC Universe in that list. I had fully intended on reading that for today's show. Connor had started reading it for today's show, and basically did not realise that it was going to be almost a prose book that was almost 50 pages long and had not even close to the time to fit it in. So that's why that's not been read. I still want to get to it at some point, but maybe something to read when it's all assembled as one full story.
I'll give really brief thoughts on what I did read, just really quickly, because I read about a third of it, and it is basically just a prose thing. And the first issue is entirely Black Lightning. I get the impression the way it's structured is each issue will be a different hero. At least that's how it presents it near the start. And I think I would like it quite a lot as a prose story. As a comic, not so much. It's very dense, and it doesn't read like a comic. It does read like a book. And maybe if I went in with that, but there were some character moments with Jefferson that I wasn't really a fan of. That I don't want to judge too much, because there's a chance that this is something I'm not supposed to like that much, and it's supposed to be a character flaw that he's going to learn over the rest of the issue, but I didn't get far enough to get to that.
Oh, there's no point in judging anything. I mean, it's almost
right.
It's almost worthless even bringing it up, because if you've not read the whole story, it does nothing.
Right? No, that's what I'm saying. Like it was. I will say it's part of why I stopped reading, because I was like, I really didn't feel like I liked this decision. And then I'd been reading for 15-20 minutes and realized I was only a third through. I was like, I can't finish this right now. But part of it was that that character beat that kind of put me off a little bit as well. So I think it's worth mentioning, even though I acknowledge that it may actually be overcome later in the issue. It may be something that's not something that I should be judging it on.
No, you shouldn't be at all. It's not even that it might overcome it. It's just it's worthless as a critique, I guess, until you've actually finished it to judge it in the context of what it is. And I'm putting that out there because I feel that way, but also I feel like the comments might pick you up on this, so I'm just addressing it right now.
Like I said, I'm judging it insofar as it affected my whether or not I continued finishing the story. Basically, it did have an impact on me, but again, like I say, maybe it's nothing.
Yeah, but you can have a history of being fickle and not continuing things for really weird reasons. So, grain of salt with anything like that coming from you, to be honest. So, yes, that's what's coming up on the show. There's a little bit of news as well, which we'll get into. This is the final week of books from November. And it is actually still November by the time this goes out. I think we'll be changing the month just afterwards, because it's not uncommon for the last week of books to be right at the end of the month, and then by the time you record the episode, we're in the next month. Not that it really matters. The reason why I'm really saying this is because I always still think of that as the last week of that month, even if the episode's already in the next month.
It's even for our Patreon books, we still think of that as November's books. If today had been the 1st of December, it still counts under November's timeline for the way that we do this show.
It's November's week 4 or week 5, depending if there's a 5th week. But so some news then. We'll get into a little bit of news. Not a whole lot this week. A couple of minor things. Batman Earth 1 Volume 3's got a tentative release date of June 8th, 2021. So that is seemingly coming. We'll see. There's a cover with that. I don't know if the cover's new, but there's a cover there with the article.
I think it's new, because I started being shared around early in the week.
And then the other thing is that there's the digital first Super Sons series starting in December. starting on December 14th. Yep. It's actually a 14 issue series digitally, so they're looking at there'll be a physical release later, probably 7 issues. Tends to be how that goes. It tends to be doubling them up.
It might be straight to trade, because I think that's what they're doing with the Deceased one.
Very possibly, but this is going to be Peter J. Tomasi writing with art by Max Raynor, Jorge Corona, and Evan Stanley. So
kind of just a straight continuation, then, really.
Yeah, it's there's this Tomasi continuing, and I never finished the last Super Sun series, and I enjoyed it. It was a decent enough read as I was reading it. It just kind of felt strenuous by the time I got later on in the book. I assume this is going to be equally fine and enjoyable if you enjoy the adventures of Damien and John.
Honestly, the digital format might really suit the Super Sons. Just like here's short stories with them rather than big overarching epics that they can try. When they feel beholden to the 6-issue arc format.
Yeah, that's assuming it even changes how it.
It might not at all, but just inherently, it feels like an excuse to try something different. But we'll see.
So, yeah. Here's a synopsis. Whoever has their name inscribed in ancient and magical parchment will be killed post haste. Oh, where's this from? In Challenge of the Super Sons, they take a page from modern social media for the big MacGuffin, the Doom Scroll. Whoever has their name inscribed on this ancient and magical parchment will be killed post haste. Now, the evil powers that be have written the names of the Justice League on the deadly dock, and Superboy and Robin are the only ones who can save their dads from certain doom. The catch: no one can know it was the boys that saved them.
So it's Death Note, but with the Super Sons.
Sure.
Okay, I'll have that. That sounds fun.
I don't know what the plot of Death Note is, so I'll take it.
Death Note, there's a journal, and if you write a name in the journal and a time, they'll die at that time. That's basically it, and it's how it's used is the story then. But that same premise is kind of what I'm getting at.
I don't understand anime trash, so this is all alien to me.
2/3 of Death Note is some of the best TV ever made. And then it goes on a bit after it should have ended for another 8 episodes for no real reason.
I don't watch trash, so I don't know anything about this. So
you say my opinions were questionable.
They are questionable. Mine's are bulletproof, quite frankly. You said you had some sort of Winter's thing.
Future State.
Future State. Sorry, I'll say not the Winter one. Future State.
Not the Winter one. No. Endless Winter, I think, is what it was called.
Endless Winter,
I forget the name of it as well. Future State. We've been given an official timeline of what books take place when, and how much time this spans across. Because I remember when the first lists came out, we were questioning some things seem to be not taking place simultaneously, and yeah, it's pretty drastic for some of them. So you got a large batch of the mostly Batman books are all taking place in 2025, but then you have Dark Detective. It seems to be the notable Batman book taking place a little bit later in 2027, along with Flash and Teen Titans. You got Shazam in 2029, and then the next big one is 2030 with Aquaman, Justice League Dark, Metropolis Midnight, Mr. Miracle, a whole bunch of books there. Then we've got The Last Lantern in 2035. Justice League is in 2040. And this is where we start to take then a big leap to the year 3000, which is House of L and Legion of Superheroes. Obviously, that one makes sense. And then we jump ahead to 4500 is Swamp Thing. 82,020 is Black Adam. And then just The End of Time is Immortal Wonder Woman. So it seems to be spanning quite a lot of time, even disregarding the one that's just the end of time. There's still quite a lot there, well beyond the traditional, the Legion stuff in, year 3000. That's pretty normal, but well beyond that as well.
Okay.
Just thought it was interesting that they're kind of putting this out there, and there's a clear timeline. It's a little bit different.
That doesn't really mean anything to me yet. Context of the stories will be everything. As of now, it's a list of numbers.
No, I get that. It's more just like looking at the families. Like for me, seeing Dark Detective is just a couple of years later after all of the other Bat books stood out to me as interesting. As I wonder why that one is just a little bit later. Or what's different about the setting in that one that is worth it being a couple of years later. I'm sure we'll find out as we're reading them, but it was interesting to me.
Yeah, well, there you go. That's pretty much it news-wise this week. There was actually some TV news, but we and Kurt have not recorded TV news yet, so I'm going to save that until...
You don't want to spoil it, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, yeah. So I'm going to save that until we record the TV news. Although, I'm glad, because we were going to record it last night, and I'm glad we pushed it, because some additional things popped up late last night that I'm glad did not have to wait until the next time we did a TV news. So I'm pleased by that.
Does this happen to be to do with Netflix by any chance?
It does happen to do with Netflix. Yes.
Do you know what? You would have been okay because I'd seen that about half an hour before we were due to start recording last night, so I would have brought it up anyway.
Yeah, but if you have to bring something up, it feels like a defeat. So if I care about it...
It would have done if it was this thing as well. You would have hated that.
If I care about it, that is. I don't care when I don't care when you bring up something about some stupid Star Wars thing. If anything, it's a point of pride that I missed it, or chose not to even include it. So yes, yeah, Mandalorian's having a bad season. I think I heard that. Okay, so moving on.
Oh, what was that about impeccable taste?
I exactly. I just gave you an example of my impeccable taste.
The comments will disagree with you, and all you're doing in the last 5 minutes is giving the comments reason to agree with me on everything.
David Lynch is better than Star Wars. End of discussion. It's over. Okay.
Just you wait till he directs an episode of The Mandalorian,
and it'll easily be the best Star Wars thing that's ever happened and ever existed.
I mean, it might well be. It might be up there, but I don't know if he's going to top Dave Filoni.
Oh, yeah, because Dave Filoni's... I don't know. What's he...
Go on, say something bad.
I don't know why. I can't even say anything bad because I barely know who he is.
Exactly. He could be the best director you've
he's
ever heard
inconsequential.
I would politely request that the fans of The Mandalorian, especially this week's episode,
did he do it?
Directed by Dave Filoni.
Did he do any of season 1?
He did at least one episode, yeah.
Yeah, that was all forgettable. So that's my opinion.
Right. Yep. So anyone who was a fan of this week's Mandalorian, and not even just the cool stuff that happened, but the actual direction of it, especially the opening sequence, which was pretty spectacularly directed, and the big samurai sequence a little bit later. Come on, let Pete know how terrible he is.
Has there been any reference to Boba Fett at all this season?
Once.
That's still too many. Trash.
No, that might actually be fair.
Trash.
That one moment might be fair to just be like, yeah, we could cut that out.
And everyone's happy because some cartoon character showed up. Oh. Some character of a kids' cartoon show.
It's not a kids' show. It's an all ages show.
Kids' cartoon. Bunch of sad grown-ups watching it with bad taste. Watching Star Wars things for kiddies. With the magic light swords. Ooh.
You sound like such an edgelord right now. It's brilliant. This is such just easy ammunition for later.
Oh no, I'm intentionally doing it. I'm called playing a character.
Oh, I know, but there's a thing called using it out of context later.
Okay, but
it'll be fun.
I don't care. God, sometimes there's no point in trying to be funny with you. Sometimes there really isn't. You don't take any of it the right way. It's...
I'm taking it perfectly fine way.
I don't know. You suck all the fun out of everything. It's kind of your patented thing. Where's Matt? I need Matt back. Matt understands my humor, or at least he makes him buckle every time. So I need Matt back. Is what I'm saying. I need to be done with you.
Yeah.
When Matt comes back, can you take some time off?
Gladly. Yeah.
You could go away for a while.
I'm happy to do that.
Please do. Okay, right. So what have we established? Star Wars sucks and should have ended decades ago. And we're about to move into the comic books. Good. Dark Knights, Death Metal, The Multiverse Who Laughs, issue 1 is first up today. Obviously, it's multiple stories, so multiple creators, which we'll sort of bring up as we go through it. And I'm just going to sort of start with the first thing I'll say is that, yeah, you can skip this one. This is
yeah. It's fine.
It's not the worst thing ever, but I wouldn't say I particularly liked any of the stories in it, so...
Yeah, I'm going to say, there's no story in here that I think is really bad. Like, there's nothing in here where I'm like, oh, that's terrible. But nothing, I'm like, oh, that's... There's not even, like... In a lot of these anthologies, even the mediocre ones, there's usually, like, one standout story where you go, that story is really good, but I'm not sure it's worth the price of entry for the whole thing. I don't even have that in this one.
Yeah, honestly, it's impressive that they did so many of these and they got to this point, which is quite near the end game of the whole thing, before one genuinely felt like it was just like completely and utterly skippable in every sense. And so on that account, I guess congratulations are bizarrely in order that it took this long to get one like this. And it's not like it's super offensively bad or anything, but you can save your money. You don't need this. I mean, I kind of like the opening, the Robin King being the storyteller and saying, listen in, dear reader, before you turn the page, these are dark stories of the multiverse, blah, blah, blah. And it ties in roughly to where we ended the last issue of the main book, in that these are just basically stories of what all these Earths have, all those worlds we saw at the end of the last issue. This is kind of stories coming out of all of those planets, and that's fine, that's cool. But ultimately, none of the stories themselves, I think, are all that great. The first one we get to properly is the one written by Patton Oswalt, of all things.
Yeah.
With Sanford Green on the art.
Which I do quite like Sanford Green. I think the art is pretty nice.
Yeah, they are solid. It fits for the tone that's going for. It's a story about Zaz going to whatever, this world's version of Arkham is, where Kite Man's also there. I love the idea that Patton Oswalt's a fan of Kite Man. I think that's kind of funny. But
everyone should be a fan of Kite Man these days.
But Zaz wants to be ascended. Like, there's like a, this like metal symbiosis, like enhancements that are happening at this Arkham, and he wants to be a part of this, and he's pissed that Kite Man's getting picked over him. But it all just kind of boils down to when some other villains arrive at the end. Condiment King, for example, when they come in and see like the previous inmates, they've all been transformed into various. So I'd say sort of like half demonic, half cyberpunk kind of looking would be my.
Yeah, you've got one that's like Cthulhu-y.
Yes, that's Calendar Man.
Yeah. Okay. You've got the what looks like a flash demon.
I'd have to go back and check who that is. The reason why that is because Calendar Man, his tattoo matches what he had previously, because you see him earlier on there, and he's got the same tattoo, which is why I know that's him. I'd have to go back and check the previous page, but
yeah, like none of them stood out to me as obvious. Like, oh, that's definitely who this person is.
No. I mean, that's Zaz with all the pipes coming out of his back, right?
Yeah, but
yeah.
I think that one's a little bit different because we saw a bit of him in the other room with the metal arms and stuff.
Yeah.
So that one, we just had that, showed to us where it was clearly Zaz in the page before. So that one wasn't really up for debate.
Then the next story is a Super Pets planet. I mean, it's not that all the planet are animals. There are humans on the planet. But it's about Crypto coming back from space and finding out that essentially a deceased style, zombie apocalypse has happened. And, comes back to the Hall of Justice to find Comet and Streaky and wondering what the hell's going on. And it is explained that a virus happened. Was it Red Medvo, which is like a red Superman wolf?
Very, very communist one as well.
Yes. Infected them. And they did get a bit of a cure for a while, but it didn't last very long. So the end of the story is actually just that, they're screwed and, like, yeah, everything's gone.
Yeah.
I mean, I laughed occasionally. This is the Amanda Connor and Palmiotti one. I laughed a little bit at when they were talking about their day in the flashback, and Batcow says, I was milked. I enjoyed that. Or
Yeah.
something to that effect.
Right. Again, this is one where it was perfectly fine. Chad Harden on the art. So this is very much the Harley Quinn team kind of reunited. It's a fine, 6, 7, 8 page, whatever it is.
It's on it's just uninspired. I feel like the story all kind of revolves around just at the end going, "Oh lol, no, the cure didn't work, so now they're screwed anyway."
It felt like they got an editor's note at the end going, "Oh yeah, by the way, this is an Earth that's screwed. Everything needs to go wrong." And they went, "Oh okay,
well,
I guess we'll write that in."
Well, more than that, I just feel like there's not really a story. It's just they wanted an excuse to make a lot of super pet jokes, and then shit, we have to give it an ending. Oh, they're just all screwed. There you go.
Yeah.
End of story.
I really like the lettering. I like how all the different boxes, like the word boxes of balloons, are different shapes for the different people. Like Crypto's is in the shield, and the chimp is in a banana, and the cat's in like a little ball of yarn. Ace is in a bat. Just things like that. I thought were nice little touches in the craft of it. That was really clear who was talking, even if you weren't looking at them.
Yeah, it's fine. You know what? This is probably the most interesting conversation about a comic we can possibly have, because I'm constantly just going, yeah, it's all right. It's fine.
You really did sum up this issue in like a sentence at the start, going, yeah, it's fine.
It's fine. It's totally skippable. It's not worth the money. You're not going to miss anything of important. We then go to another Earth where Star City has had its name changed. The Guardians of the Universe have taken over Earth.
Changed to New Oa.
Yes. Wait. Oh yeah, New Oa Subsector 70. You're right. And Green Arrow is like an outlaw, and he's trying to help these teenagers survive and escape. But then Hal Jordan shows up, and he's kind of like, he's working for the Guardians. He's like, nah, this is punishment. This is punishable. You guys sneaking around. It's a military state. And again, there's not really much of a story. Just the final page is just like, Ollie tries to talk Hal out of this and to let them go. Hal says no, so Ollie's like, okay, well, I've got a yellow arrow here. So it just ends with them, going towards each other. So I
was really surprised when I turned the page and there was no more, because I know it had the credit thing here, but and that in this instance is telling me that it's the end of the story, but that's not necessarily true. Sometimes you have a couple of pages, then you have your credits, and then a couple more.
And what's interesting here is that the writer here, Saladin Ahmed, has done a lot of Marvel stuff that I think, from what I've sampled of his work, it's been very good. So
yeah, I've read some of his comics. I've read some of his prose. I think I generally quite like his stuff. Not all of it, but I think he's a very capable writer.
But he's very good, and I think this story doesn't really show off any of his skills or any of his quality, because it just ends so quickly. There's no story to tell.
Right. If you're purely a DC fan, you don't read anything from Marvel really or elsewhere, and there are a lot of people like that who are out there. And and this is your first experience with Saladin Ahmed, you're not going to have a great impression of him as a writer going forward from this. Whereas we both know, okay, no, he's capable of a lot better at this. We've seen it. But if this is your first exposure to his work, I get why you might, next time you see his name, you probably wouldn't be excited, which is a shame, because I think he can do a lot of good stuff.
Scott Eaton's on the art, which is fine.
Yeah, I mean, it looks all right. It does exactly what it's supposed to do. I like his designs for older Ollie, and I like this particular Hal design, with the shoulder pads and the collar. I think it looks pretty decent for this type of Hal.
It's once again, there's a theme of these stories in this book where I don't really feel there are stories. They're just like, here's a world, and we don't really have a story to tell in that world. We're just going to show you the bare bones idea of it.
Barely even vignettes.
There's no lesson by the end. There's no nothing. This just ends with the fight starting, and it's not that dissimilar to the Super Pets one, where it feels like there's not really a story outside of just, here's the concept. Oh, it's time to end. And that just is something that's permeating throughout the issue. And the next one, which is called The Fear Index, written by Brandon Thomas and art by Tom Mandrake. This is a world where Scarecrow's fear toxin is basically just getting into the atmosphere, and the entire world's been just infected with it. And there's some nights where it's worse, and it'll be a factor of 8, I think they say later, which is like you just can't survive if you're outside in that. And this guy at the start gets, as I say, this guy, Jean-Paul Villi. But you don't know that at the start, though. You don't find out who he is until a bit later. At the start, he's just a blonde guy in a hoodie. And he gets his mask ripped off by some muggers, and luckily for him, no, Steel comes and saves him. I will say, I get that the art is doing like Scarecrow vision, where the next page is there's this like demonic looking, it looks like Bane and some other characters, and it's the idea that Jean-Paul's so scared that this is what he's seeing, is these weird, like, oddly shaped versions of things.
It's like an Azrael bat as well, isn't it, at the front?
The problem is that it's just kind of a mess to look at. I think these couple of pages here, I just didn't necessarily find them all that, I don't know, engaging.
I know, I'm with you. I was thinking this as well, because I think most of the story is fine where he's not affected by it. It's not my favorite art, don't get me wrong, but it's fine. But those couple of pages where everything's distorted and blown up and kind of like ethereal 90s is how I want to describe it.
Yeah, it's just kind of a mess. I don't think it really flows. There's not enough context for what's happening in the scene, I don't think, to really have that any of this feel like it has impact or context. But Steel comes and saves him. It just kind of explains what's going on back at his lair, and then he's like, "Yeah, I've got a bit more." I mean, there's kind of a, I guess, a nice little point that's made in here where Steel explains that some people just have a natural, not resistance. He's not immune to it by any means, but he can handle it a bit better than some others can.
Better constitution.
Yeah. And he talks about how certain people, like certain groups of people, if they've been forced to like endure some of the worst aspects of human history, brutality and humiliation, oppression, things like that, then it's kind of almost built into, it's kind of like evolution, where just naturally those people are built up to. So there's kind of like a how do I phrase this? There's like a it's obviously addressing things like oppression and slavery here. It's talking about the idea that he's got built up a little bit of toughness towards fear because
like social immunity.
Because as people have like had to deal with this, and feeling constant fear is something they've already had to live with. It's this idea that lends to. So there's kind of a nice point being made in this, but story.
It's kind of just a throwaway bit of dialogue at the end. Really, it doesn't actually. The story doesn't make that point. It's just he kind of says that at the end.
Yeah, he kind of says that separately, and again, it just ends with him holding up his hammer, saying, "Well, there's always more work to do." Again, it just feels like it. Again, here's the concept of a world, but with no story.
Yeah.
We're doing this. And I was shocked when I turned the page and that was it. That was like, I was on to the ads at the end. I was like, oh, okay.
I was shocked and relieved at the same time. Because I'm like, oh, that's it. I'm done. It's not 80 pages. Because thank God, if there was 80 pages and there was like twice as much of this. Oh, no thanks.
I was expecting it to go back to Robin King at the end to wrap up Crypt Keeper style. I felt like it was going that way.
I get that. But I mean, I did happen to read the opening contents page, so I knew it wasn't going to.
Oh, look at me. I read the contents page.
I'm sorry for reading what the book gives me.
I never read the contents page in these anthologies. Never.
I do, so I can be aware if there are any obvious teams where I'm like, nope, I'm not reading that story.
No, there's a surprise element. You got to go through and get a nice surprise, or in some cases, a nasty surprise. And then sometimes when they don't tell you till the end of the story who's on it, it's like a nice surprise. Like, oh, that makes sense why I like this, because it's this person.
my time is valuable, and I'm like, nope, I can skip that one. I can skip that one. But in this one, there were no teams like that. No obvious red flags. It sort of says I read it all, and then I'm like, probably could have read none of that.
It's skippable. It's totally skippable. I there's not a whole lot to really say about it, honestly.
I don't really have anything positive to really recommend it.
I feel like we've done a couple of these before. We've got these anthologies about different stories of these different dark multiverses or different Batman or different whatever, all tied into the idea of all these worlds and this crisis in the dark multiverse. And I feel like this is just maybe one time going back to the well too much, where I don't know if there was any actual good ideas for this one. Because before we've had some really great standout examples in those anthologies of, hey, this one or two stories have really, really made that one worth it. And there's a nice lot of context because a lot of these Batmen that they're telling us about, they're popping up in the main book, later on with Castle Bat or later on with the baby one, or like they all felt like they ended up kind of being something later. I don't feel like any. I mean, maybe one of these will be referenced later, but I don't see how.
If anything, it'll probably be this last one, where maybe this version of Steel will show up to help out at some point.
Unless they end up like fighting through some of these Earths that have arrived, or perhaps we won't see this Steel, but we'll see like some people from this Earth, and it's like, why are they all so crazy? And they'll say, oh, on that Earth, everyone's been like doped up on scarecrow gas for years. It'll be okay, so that's the tie to this. That's the tie to this story.
I can definitely see happening. At which point I'm fine with just that line of dialogue. I didn't need this.
Yeah, or likewise, we'll see the demonic, Arkham inmates or something. So, on that Earth, this happens, and it's like, okay, fine.
Yeah, I can see 3 panels of someone from the Justice League fighting those.
Yes, a rage zombie of one of the animals like showing up. Like there's possibilities, but I'm not so sure if this added death into those.
No, I don't think it did.
If indeed they do pop up in some way, but yeah, this seems skippable. So I mean, I don't think many people actually wait and hear our thoughts before they buy their books for the week. But it's one of those things where maybe some of these are borderline, and you wait to hear our thoughts before you throw down the $5-6 whatever this costs. I can't remember.
Especially if you're a digital reader, where it's easy to just hold off and then. Or maybe it's some of these you weren't planning on buying at all until you hear people talk about it. Oh, actually, I'll go and grab that. Because I mean, I've done that before, but in the past.
Oh, sure.
Hot buzz from other people. I'm like, hey, I'll go check this out. Like one of the big examples with the Tom King Looney Tunes book, the crossover, the Elmer Fudd one. I had no intention of picking it up until I heard all the buzz, and then I went and checked it out, and it was fantastic.
Anyway, what are you giving this?
I'll give it a 4. It's not terrible, but it does nothing to justify its existence.
Yeah, I don't know if... I think all of the individual stuff is probably a 5, but I'm going to give it a 4 as well, because I think it's somehow all feeling equally kind of pointless, annoys me a little bit more as a whole.
Yeah.
The sum of the parts is more annoying than any individual part. So
if any of these stories were a backup on another book, you'd be like, it's a very skippable backup. I might dock half a point. But when it's a full book of those, it's like, oh, really? This is it? Over and over again?
I wouldn't always dock anything for a bad backup. If the main story was like a 10 out of 10 perfect, I'm just going to disregard the backup and just... Because if I cared that much about the main story, if it was that good, I'm not going to let some stupid backup like infect my opinion of it.
I am. It's part of the comic.
Technicalities. If I got something I'm not happy with, I'm not letting some backup ruin it for it. Anyway, so that was the multiverse who laughs. Yes, the DC Comics bank account who laughs because they've got your money already potentially, and then you've realised that you didn't need to spend it, and that's a shame.
It's a tragedy.
Ah, dear. Wonder Woman 767, Mariko Tamaki writing with Rafa Sandoval on the art. The next part in this Maxwell Lord story, and kind of a conclusion for now, surprisingly. I think this run keeps surprising us with how quickly it wraps up things that we think are going to last a while.
There are some examples of this where, like, I mean, this isn't actually, not comic specifically, but like Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. in TV, constantly surprised us with how quickly it was such a pleasant surprise. It was, oh, nothing's dragged out. It's so quick. It's getting to the point. Whereas this, I'm kind of feeling a little bit like, no, could have done with some more time spending on some of this stuff. Like these were really strong elements I was really enjoying, and I feel like we're just rushing through them. We've got to hit the beats.
I think I like a lot of this issue, and I think the actual fight, if you want to call it that, between Wonder Woman and Max, where he's essentially using his mind powers to control her, because she walks in, she sees Liar Liar, and I thought it was a bit weird. Not that Liar Liar was acting out of character, but the scene felt kind of weird. So I was very pleased when it became clear that no, she's not really there. Max is just making her see Liar Liar.
It was my first thought. I was like, there's no way she's here. This has got to be Max.
And it becoes this kind of, because I think the scenes that I really like in here, he makes her commit essentially seppuku.
Yeah, he tells her to stab herself.
Yes, and to be fair, because I went back and checked after it's revealed what she did to sort of survive, And to be fair, it all works because
it's in a gorgeous silhouette.
Yeah, we never, from the angle we see it, her actually doing the classic, under the armpit. I mean, she does cut herself because it's a technicality. He says, stab yourself, and she does technically break skin, but she breaks it at the side of her, side, as opposed to, through the chest,
her chest,
whatever.
Yeah.
Big, great, full page spread of her getting back up. Why the ground is crumbling into rocks as she stands up, I'm not entirely sure. She's that angry that her footsteps are.
Yeah. I don't know on that one. Reasons.
But no, I like this idea of him like saying, you will bend to my will, you will do this, you will do that, and it's this constant fight because he says, put your sword down, and the sword weighs, it becomes
Sword's heavy. Yeah,
and it falls down. She's trying to lift it up out the rock, and I get why the rock's crumbling at this point because the swords hit it, and like this like sort of battling of wills. Like I love this idea, but how like the classic struggle of like, I can't really go to this example, but do you know in X-Men: The Last Stand when you got Iceman and you've got Pyro, and they've got,
that was not the example I was expecting.
You've got that classic, not a classic in the movie, but the classic example of the two opposing energy blasts hitting each other and it going back and forth, right? In the middle.
For someone who would like a better example that's better than that movie, Pete won't care as much. I mean, he probably likes it equally. But Harry Potter, they do that repeatedly between Harry and Voldemort.
Whatever. I don't watch Larry Potter. Okay. So, but I like the idea of that, but it's invisible. And that's essentially what this is, where Max is trying to control it and she's trying to fight it. And it's this like struggle back and forth between them as she's coming for him. And I think that's actually done quite effectively. Where it, and I think it is, but while it may be a bit over the top with like the ground crumbling at Wonder Woman's feet, which is basically in every single panel of her throughout this entire fight, I think it's actually maybe a little bit of artistic license in the sense that it's doing an effective job and making this feel like an epic fight, despite the fact they're essentially both just like standing still and maybe kneeling down here or there or trying to.
Do you think there was like maybe recently an earthquake or something? Because when she hits Max eventually and he goes into the ground, he shatters the ground as well. I'm like, this is a very weak concrete floor. I mean, Vertigo needs to invest in some better castles.
I mean, that's fair. So she arrests him, and that's all that hunky dory. Interestingly, he does bring up, like, hey, we've seen things from the multiverse, and I saw you kill me. You killed me, and damn it, I'm going to deal with that. I'm going to get my revenge. I do kind of like that. I will say that reminds me that there was a lot of editor's notes in the first half of this. It went away after a while. Like by the time we got to the next snap flashback, and it said all the way back in Infinite Crisis. From that point on, they kind of disappeared, but there was like 5 editor's notes before that, which felt a bit
I think
weird.
Like one of them was like, hey, last issue. And I'm like, oh, okay. That probably doesn't need the, like, it was the one about Count Vertigo. I'm like, do we need one for last issue?
Just a bit overzealous, I think, on the editor's notes. Yeah. But the actual fight, I really like. I like the Infinite Crisis sort of coming into it as part of his motivations. Like the idea of him learning that is very interesting. It's a nice. I don't think it's an intentional callback, but it reminds me back in Justice League versus Suicide Squad when I got excited because Superman knew who Maxwell Lord is, and everyone else like didn't really know how seriously to treat him yet. And Superman's like, no, I know him, and it was this big sort of moment. I love the idea of it coming a little bit full circle here with now Max remembering things from that timeline that he has a grudge to pick with Wonder Woman, because of course he does, because she's the one who killed him. So that makes a lot of sense to me. I think the art's fairly solid, but honestly, my only real complaint that bothered me throughout is that sometimes the lasso, like on her belt's not the right word, but when it's hanging from her,
just on a hip,
sometimes it was drawn in a way where it looked like it was more like a cloth, because like all the strands just kind of were solid together, and it's not a big deal, but it's something that I noticed a couple of times. And
I've got like I'm finding Sandoval is very hit or miss for me. It seems I thought it was just Flash where I didn't really like him, but I found he has a similar problem on this as well, where every so often like people will just look weirdly chunky. like in a panel here or there. Like it's not as consistent as like his Barry Allen was. Don't get me wrong.
Mm.
But there are points where, like, all of a sudden, like Diana has a really fat face out of nowhere, for example. But it's consistent with all the characters that it's like this. And I don't know. It's just something that I'm finding I don't enjoy that much. Even though I thought I liked Sandoval, and it was just his Flash that I didn't enjoy. It's not terrible. I'm a little disappointed that we are having another artist on this arc. Like, you know, it's a 2-issue thing here that we essentially with the last issue with Vertigo, and we couldn't have had the same artist for 2 issues.
Nope, no consistency for you.
No.
We're just not allowed. I mean, they are. I mean, Sandoval's not like my favorite artist by any means, but I do think there's some great pages in here, some great panels, some great moments. They're not all up to the same standard, and I think that's a fair point. But I mean, for the most part, I was pretty happy with it.
It's not bad. Like I say, there are some great moments. It's just a bit inconsistent, I think, is my problem. Like the silhouette stabbing, and then you know, her lying on the floor with Max at the throne, I think is one of the best pages in the issue. I think that looks fantastic.
Yeah.
So it's definitely not all bad.
Yeah, the ending is kind of interesting, I guess, where Wonder Woman's just sort of, you know, relaxing a bit because she's been through an ordeal, and it is like, no, take a day off. You can save the world tomorrow. You've had a rough time. But Max is taken to prison. He's got a big neck collar on that's like blocking his powers, as you'd expect.
Usual, yeah.
Yes. But he gets stabbed in his cell by Liar Liar, who's in there waiting for him. And it's just setting up that Liar Liar is going to be, I assume, prominent in the story next couple of issues.
Well, I mean, it does say next Liar Liar returns, so it seems a reasonable assumption.
So I'll have to see what they do with Liar Liar on her own terms, away from her father, because, you know, so far she showed up. She was trying to do this for her dad, and now with him being locked up and her, you know, given that she stabs him and says "Long live the king" or not, he would certainly imply that she's going solo and going her own way. So we'll see how.
I hope this wasn't a fatal stabbing, because that would be really disappointing to have just
I doubt
lost Max Lord like that.
I highly doubt it. I wouldn't even. This is not that you're.
No, I know this is comic.
Not that you're acting the same way, but assuming that Max was actually dead here would be a lot like Matt thinking Superboy was dead in that issue of Action Comics that he freaked out about.
Yeah, see, this is the thing. I don't think he actually is. I'm pretty sure he's not. But they go out of this way to look pretty dead, and, you know, the dialogue, like "Long live the king" or not, is very clearly implying that he's dead here. There's an implication, at least, which is more than it seemed like with Matt's situation. But I'm sure they'll rush him into treatment and they'll save his life somehow. You know, he's not quite dead. The usual.
She doesn't check a pulse. She's just hoping he's dead. She's being egotistical. Has she stabbed anyone before? I don't know. Maybe not. But
I want to know: does she have a good motivation here for patricide, or is it just for the hell of it?
I will find out next issue, I suppose, if we get a bit more context for it.
And she's got some fancy light armor.
Yes. The blade itself also looks like it may be magical, just because it's got a sort of sleek handle with a design on it. Might not be, but.
And so I was like, "What's your basis for this?" I mean, it's a nicely carved handle. It didn't seem that.
I'm going alongside with the magical armor. It feels like maybe it's a.
I mean, it might be. There's not enough for me to say that definitely not, but it didn't stand out as magical to me, especially next to the mystical light armor, which seems to be pretty, you know, translucent. It's quite a nice design for that. I do like that.
I don't know. It looks like the magical knife in Demon Souls. Maybe that's why I'm thinking that. I've been playing too much video games.
Well, I mean, fair enough. I can't comment on that one.
But yes, it was alright. I like this issue more than the last one. I will say it doesn't feel like the run so far is necessarily living up to the heights that Mariko Tamaki can soar to. You know, I think her X-23 is better than this, but it's still relatively early days yet.
I feel like so far all the beats I've liked, like all the major beats, they're just not hitting the execution. They're not hitting the timing of these beats. Perhaps, like, you know, I'm saying, you know, I feel like, hey, you know, Liar Liar has only been gone for like 4 issues, and then okay, we're back. You know, I'm like, okay, that feels really soon. Max Lord was only really around for one proper arc. It's like, okay, this feels like it's over quite quickly, but I like the core beats that it is doing at the start and end of all these stories. I feel like there's not enough time for them.
It's one of those things though where every single issue is very easy and enjoyable to read. So there's definitely something to be said for that. But
yeah, definitely.
Yeah. What are you giving it?
I'm just gonna give this a straight 7.
Yeah. I'll probably go a nudge up. I'll say 7.5. I'll even have to go with the 8. I really like the battle of sort of the main battle that happens
nice.
as he's trying to control her and she's kind of fighting back. Like I actually really like that, and that's a good. I'd probably say it's like a half the issue in the middle of it.
It's at least a third, yeah.
So really, really good stuff with that. So yeah. The Flash 766, Kevin Shnick and Will Conrad on the art. This is wrapping up this 4-issue fill-in arc before Endless Winter begins, and I'm happy it's over. I'll say that much.
I forgot to read it. I thought, maybe I will, maybe I won't. And then I was reading all my books before we started, and I was like, eh.
I don't even know. So if you remember last issue, it's established this idea that Desmond it kind of merged with all of the past like holders of the Philosopher's Stone, so all the previous alchemies and other chemists who had ever used it. And Desmond seems a bit more straight-headed because he sort of like fights through and talks to Barry for a minute and says, "Oh, you have to recreate the Philosopher's Stone. Maybe then I'll be able to like fight back against these others." And Barry's like, "How do I know I can trust you?" And he's like, "Well, you don't. But I mean, these guys all seem worse." Barry gets John Stewart to take out his eye cameras. If you remember, he's got those in his pupils.
I'd forgotten, to be honest.
Yeah, he talked to Will Magnus because one of his ancestors is one of the chemists, tied to alchemy. Honestly, though, Barry ends up just kind of like. He essentially builds the Philosopher's Stone off panel, right? We never actually see him really do it. It just kind of has happened, apparently. And he runs into alchemy. They fight. It turns out Desmond was being coy, and he's actually not as out of control as he seemed to be, and he's actually pretty evil. And there's like a weird moment here in the middle where alchemy uses the stone to like start to turn all the buildings in the street that they're on into acid. And Barry yells out he's turned the buildings into liquid acid, and of course my mind could only go boiling acid.
Can't blame me on that one.
That's a Batman Forever reference for anyone.
That's a very on-brand movie reference for this show.
Yeah, it's a DC movie. But I'm just always laughing because that last time we watched it to review, it was the first time I'd ever noticed that same character popped up again at the later on, and he's the one who yells out, "It's Batman!" as he like jumps to the.
I'm pretty sure half of our review is you just doing that line over and over again.
It's boiling acid. Oh, it's terrible. Barry saves people. He uses the Yes, he uses his Philosopher's Stone that he made to change the acid into like ice or something. I don't know. He's transmuted things. Look, I'll be honest. This issue, like, I was so out of it and didn't even really want to read it that much. I thought I'll just do it to finish things off. That I was kind of skimming it a bit more than reading it in depth by the time I got to the back half because I really didn't give a shit about anything that was happening.
You were hoping I'd read it as well, so I could pick up on some of these bits.
I was, yes, and you've left me hanging here, you little prick. So,
well,
But basically, Barry starts running around him, and something, you're doomed to turn to stone because you're using the Philosopher's Stone, chemical reaction, something.
Is this another one of those weird leaps this run's had?
I mean, I could read you the couple of narration boxes to explain it if you want. I mean, I
don't know if there's an actual good explanation or if this is just another one of those weird, oh, well, that must be the case, and leap to this and that, like this arc has done consistently.
Hold on. Both Alchemy and I are using Elysium, which is the element that Barry created, of course, if you've forgotten that, to protect his ring from the Speed Force or something.
Sure.
To protect ourselves from the Philosopher's Stone. He uses it to stop the stone from taking over his body, so it occurred to me that I could use it to possibly block the stone from taking over my mind. My greatest scientific, because the stone's corrupted everyone that's ever used it, so that's just how Barry uses it and doesn't get screwed up. Blah blah.
Sure.
My greatest scientific contribution is Elysium. It isn't creating Elysium, but it's finding a way to dissolve it using rapid friction and leave the alchemy open to all attacks and all the stone's properties. So basically, he's disintegrating the protective Elysium that alchemy is using to protect himself from the stone. And when he dissolves it all, alchemy turns to stone. And that's how he defeats alchemy. So he's literally a stone statue when Barry defeats him.
Never to be seen again.
I think he's taken to, like, is it the museum he's taken to? It's Iron Heights. Of course it's Iron Heights. Why would it be a museum? But he's literally. But what's funny is he's literally got like a base with a plaque on it, as if he's actually a statue that was like put up. It's
like on a plinth.
Yes.
Yeah.
There's a scene where Barry's like hiding outside like a jewelry shop, and the guy comes out. He's like, "Hey, you're looking for a ring? I can see that look in your face." And he's like, "Oh no, not really. I'm waiting for a friend." He's like, "A lady friend?" He's like, "Well, yeah, technically, but I wasn't looking for a ring." And the guy's just like, "Hey, look, if you when it's time to take that step, come back and come see me because I want to help you get the right ring." So it's
I want that sale, damn it.
So it's I guess it's seeding the idea of like setting up the Barry Iris marriage, which I was not expecting from a fill-in arc. I have to say.
All I'm saying is, frankly, if Barry doesn't propose with the flash ring, what's the point?
Yeah, I mean, maybe it's because DC have got plans coming up soon to actually address a Barry and Irish marriage of some kind, and they told, the fill-in writer here to, like, put in the first little inkling of that idea for later. But it does feel a little bit out of nowhere here.
That feels particularly weird after this arc in particular, where their relationship was all over the place.
Yeah, it felt really weird and not even rocky, just oddly
early
out of character and early and weird and yeah. So Barry runs away from Iron Heights, says he's going to keep his head on straight, and it just says to be continued in Justice League Endless Winter issue 1. I mean, it's not really a continuation of this. I mean, unless the statue of alchemy pops up in the story.
No, I can tell you now that, like, for example, Justice League Dark, the end of that also says to be continued in Endless Winter, and I don't think the final page is a tease for that. I think it's a tease for after Future State, basically.
Yes. I think that's fair. They just want people to buy Endless Winter. Essentially what it is.
I suspect Endless Winter will be more enjoyable than this Flash arc. I will be shocked if it's not.
As for a rating, I mean, it may be the worst of the 4 issues just because it
was such a low bar already.
The structure just isn't there, so I'm probably going to go with like 4.5, 4. I'll go with 4. I'll go with straight 4. I'm not gonna lie. Right, we've talked about 3 books so far, and I've given out a 4.5 out of 4. I'm not happy. Okay, it's not been a good week of comics so far.
It's really not, has it?
And I've not even got to the Romita Junior book yet.
Oh god, yeah, that's still to come.
Oh dear. Okay, Tom Taylor, our Lord and Savior, will save us because Suicide Squad number 11. Tom Taylor, of course, writing, Bruno Redondo on the art. The final issue of this run, of this book even.
Yeah.
I'm sure there'll be a Suicide Squad at some point again with different characters.
Probably March.
Probably March. That was the implication, but Conrad had to spell it out because that's how he rolls.
I just being clear that it's not just going to be at some point. It'll be at the first opportunity.
So, Jog is alive because it turns out he's half god.
Yeah, this far out of nowhere.
This feels out of nowhere. I did laugh quite a bit though, the way he just kind of like nonchalantly tells the Black Racer he's not interested in finding out about his godhood. He's like, nah, I'm good. I'm gonna go see my friends. Leave me alone.
Yeah.
This is to me a sign, and I already felt this. I already felt, given things that Taylor said on Twitter and various other things. But I think this actually kind of confirms that there's plans for these characters going forward. This in particular, this scene, setting up this idea that he's like half god, and that this is why he's alive, and it's going to be. I feel like this says no. Taylor's got something that he's going to do with this later in some other book, and we've been saying for a long time as well that past a certain point, the story of the Revolutionaries is not a Suicide Squad story anymore, so it wouldn't make sense to keep doing it in a Suicide Squad book.
And I mean, just two things to add to this. He even mentioned this week he's working on his next project with Bruno Redondo. So
yes,
yeah, and I think if nothing else, the final page, not to jump ahead too much, but the final page establishes this, where usually the credits page has the big Suicide Squad, as part of the title sequence. That's not in this issue, and the credits page is at the end. It's the very last thing, and it says the Revolutionaries. I think it's pretty clear there's going to be a Revolutionaries book to follow this up.
Yeah, if it's not called that, then at least that's where it's going to be in spirit.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'll be surprised if it's not just called that at this point. I think that's the most recognizable thing. The way that they can market it is it's that book. But I mean, we'll see.
The sad part of that is it'll be lucky if it gets to 12 issues. To be honest, I, as much as I like this, I don't think the book's going to sell that well, just because it's a bunch of new characters.
Not. Yeah,
it's not going to be long for this world, and maybe that's fine if they go into it saying this is a 12-issue book and we can tell his story, then that's fine. But it's a shame that
it's when he goes in with 5 years of plans and they give him 12 issues.
It's just a shame that that's just because it's new characters. No matter how much we might love it, and I'm sure we will because we've been loving this, that it's just not going to sell that well, and therefore it's going to be DOA immediately. It's going to be like, okay, this was always days are numbered the second it hits the stand.
This does kind of lead into some of my problems with this issue. Is in I still like most of the issue. It's very good. It's Tom Taylor. He's still writing all his usual banter and dialogue. It's great stuff. I do think it's the weakest issue of the run because I think it doesn't really have a proper ending. It is very much like, hey, there's more coming. We're going to get to the rest of it, and it doesn't feel like an ending to this story in a lot of ways.
That's fair, but when we get the eventual Revolutionaries omnibus, and it'll start with issues 1 to 11 of Suicide Squad, this is just Act 1 of whatever the story is.
Absolutely.
I assume.
Yeah.
So Zebra Man is containing the blast from the girl. Jog comes in and they're like, you die. He's like, yeah, I got better. And basically, he speeds out Zebra Man out to the ocean so that he can let the blast go. Although I do like the little touch of like Zebra Man starting to like falter. He's like, I don't know if I can do this anymore. And the other guy, I can't remember his name, uses his powers to say pride. And Zebra Man's like, yes, I can do this, damn it. I'm the best, I can do this. Like he uses it to motivate. So it's like a positive use of his powers as opposed to the usual negative one. I mean, it's still one of the 7 sins, of course, but still. So yeah, that's how it is. I love the full page spread of Jog holding Zebra Man. Like Superman would hold Lois in the carry position.
Yeah,
running from the blast, but it's this big bulky Zebra Man. I like it.
It's amusing. Yeah,
it's all very good. But
I like how he just like chucks him on the ground when he gets back as well.
Yes. So and he's like, "Hey, fill me in. Should I leave the girl who was going to explode out there to die?" And like, "No, okay, I'll go get her."
I do like this takes place over literally 3 panels. Like he gets back, throws Zebra Man. It's like, should I leave in the middle of the ocean? And it's like, no. Runs back out, and then back, and then Zebra Man hits the ground. Like it's all in that space of that. It's pretty good.
Wink's very distressed. Like, no, go save her.
Yeah.
All very good. I also laugh. So Justice League shows up to take in Black Mask into custody. I did cackle quite a bit. Harley shooting Black Mask in the leg, and then Osita doing the same thing. It was a very good bit of dark comedy. It's hard. I can't not read that and think of Terminator 2 when John Connor makes Arnold promise not to kill anyone, and he's just a guard in the knee and says he'll live. Like that's all I could think about when I get this joke. But,
sure.
That's essentially what it is.
And then they call in diplomatic immunity, basically.
Diplomatic immunity!
I knew you were going to do that. But they basically go, hey, Mom, can you stop the Justice League taking us, please?
Well, she does. She stands up against Batman and basically burns him and talks him off the country. It's delightful and all of its own way.
Go deal with your own American shit problems.
Harley's leaving the group. She's like, hey, I'm sure, I'm proud of you guys. Whatever you're going to do is going to be great, but I have to go and speak to Deadshot's daughter, and brings her his mask, and it's like basically offers us some therapy. So I'm going to stick around and make sure you're okay. So they go back inside so she can hear stories about her dad, and that's the other thing that I think, I've got a feeling that Taylor's going to do something with Deadshot's daughter. Like it feels ripe for exploration.
She feels primed to be joining the Revolutionaries at some point in their sequel series.
Yeah. Hell, I'll even take a live shot miniseries if he wants to.
I mean, I'll buy that as well. Don't get me wrong.
I ain't gonna complain. I think it's interesting that he's kind of creating his own little corner of the DCU that's, it had Harley and Deadshot in it, but for the most part, it's kind of its own new thing. And, Deadshot's daughter as a character is not new, but doing something with her where she's kind of like the new Hawkeye and the way Kate Bishop became Hawkeye is kind of an interesting.
And I like that Deadshot's actually dead, right?
For now.
I know it's for now. I know this is comics, nothing is forever. But the fact that it's stuck even to the end of this series, surprising. Like when we heard, it must have been about 4 months ago now, where we first heard, "Oh, I'm going to kill Deadshot." Yeah, right when it was getting solicited, and we all went, "Yeah, right, whatever." And then it happened in that issue, and we were like, "Oh, he actually did it." And then there was no immediate reversal in the next couple of issues. That it's no, that's landed. That is the status quo, at least for a little while, and that's kind of exciting. That it tells me that Taylor does actually have, I don't want to say pull, but he has some leeway in the DC editorial offices where he can actually, pull off some story beats because he wants to pull off the story beat, and not just immediately get shut down.
Yeah, the ending scenes of the issue are that the Revolutionaries round up several world leaders, one of which is very clearly meant to be the current president of the United States. Not only because he's golfing, but because, he doesn't look exactly like him, but there's a lot of similarities.
He does in the
when he's holding his hands against his ears, he looks like Trump. He just does.
Yeah, the only way they could have made it clearer was making it a red hat instead of a blue one.
Yes. I feel like that was see, it's a blue hat. You can't sue us. It's a blue hat.
It does feel a little bit like that. That said, I think it would fall under parody anyway, because I know in Once and Future, the Gillen King Arthur thing, they're doing a similar thing right now with Boris Johnson.
But so they round up some world leaders from various places, and they essentially say to them, "We're not going to kill you, but we have all the evidence of all the ways that you have used Task Force X in the past. So some of you have funded it, some of you have used it for your dirty work, some of you have benefited from it, blah, blah, blah. You've ordered assassinations, you've done all this shady stuff. And if any of you ever come after us, essentially to clear their own names and sort of keep themselves off the hook, we'll release everything. And your families, everyone that knows you, will find out about everything you've ever done." And this is kind of their... So it sets up this new status quo where they're not on the run anymore, which I think is a very important thing. If this is Act 1 of this team, and that we're getting into an Act 2 now where they can operate without being on the run from, the international justice system, essentially. That sets up a really cool thing. So I do kind of agree that there's a lot of finale stuff in this that makes it feel a little less special than a lot of the other issues, but
it's a very good issue.
Yeah, I'm not sure what I would ask for different, to be honest, in the context of what it is and the fact that we are going to get more. We are. There's no doubt that we're getting more. So
yeah, I'm sure we are. There's undeniable, I think, at this point. They haven't officially announced it, but honestly, the biggest thing I would say that is my, in terms of an actual problem beyond just the finale stuff is, I wish the jog stuff didn't just feel like out of nowhere and really random and just like, I guess we're doing this now. I feel like I could have used some establishing or some time, or not just show up here and now. Like, I don't know, it felt a bit weird to me.
Yeah, it didn't bother me too much. Again, because I feel like this is something that's going to be explored more by Taylor
sure
later.
it is, yeah.
I think what I would commend this 11-issue book, though, and I think it ending with titling it The Revolutionaries instead of just saying Suicide Squad like it normally would, is a very bold claim of saying what the intent of this was. It was about setting up this new team of characters, and I've not necessarily recognized or remembered all of their names yet, because it's a lot of new names, right? And I struggle with names at the best of times.
And I think it's notable. This is one of the only issues that hasn't had it pop up with all their names, right? Most issues do.
Yeah, but the point I'm trying to make, though, is that the fact that they have done this to such an extent where I care about this team, I care about these characters, and I want to see more adventures with them, given how often comics try to make new characters and try to make them feel important, and I I often just end up feeling like not intentionally, but there's almost just this rejection of them in my taste and in my brain, because it feels like you're trying to force something that isn't feeling natural or doesn't feel like it fits. And this was kind of a masterclass of just how to give a whole host of characters and just building them up a little by little, and just through good writing, good interactions, good little bits of backstory here or there, and good storytelling makes characters what they are and makes them likable and makes them lasting and makes you want to see more of their journeys and not just feel like they're fodder for whatever the main hero or the book story is.
Right, and I think that's why you do this, essentially this story here in a Suicide Squad book first and not a Revolutionaries. But one is the cynical side of, no, a Suicide book has a built-in sales flaw that they can guarantee a recoup of costs, and maybe then the Revolutionaries sequel will sell more because it'll bring that audience along. But the other part is it gives us an excuse to have them interact with a lot of key characters for the DC, like Harley, Deadshot, and even Amanda Waller at the start. Like we've got all these familiar faces that we all know, and we know what they're supposed to sound like, and so we've got a baseline for them to interact off of on a consistent basis, not just a random guest star here or there in the first couple of issues. It's no, here's 10, 11 issues with all with various DC characters consistently. That gives you, it forms these connections, it makes them feel part of the universe and not just a separate bubble that they could have easily done if you just start in the Revolutionaries book.
Yeah, so I'm excited to see more of this team. I'm excited to see more of the characters. And we didn't really talk about the art or anything, but that's because Redondo's been doing the art for most of the book, and it's been wonderfully consistent. Coloring across the board has been very vivid and bold, and it's been a pleasure to read. It's been a pleasure to it's been kind of a feast for the eyes every single issue. Nice and clean, and
it's always popped in a very fun way. Even when it's doing like big or even dark beats at points.
Yeah.
It's felt like it's tongue in cheek feels a little bit harsh, but that sounds bad. But I mean it in a good way. In that sense, like it's got a sense of humor to it. It's having fun.
Yeah. So what are you giving it?
I'm going to give it an 8, which is the lowest I've given an issue of this 11-issue book. But again, it's still an 8. It's still pretty good.
8.5 for me. So that is Suicide Squad number 11. Action Comics 1027. Brian Michael Bendis writing with John Romita Jr. on the art, which I cover anyway. But it's notable this issue. Connor, once again, as part of his Patreon books, which, one of the higher tiers in patreon.com/MailerFizzTV, you can make myself or Connor read a book. And once again, Action Comics was picked for Connor. So he's jumping back in to talk about this John Romita Jr. masterclass in bad art. So it is the end of the arc, more or less, kind of wrapping up a bunch of stuff. The fight with Red Cloud has been going on. That kind of wraps up. Leon's kind of fled, not just the city, but fled the Earth, because she's from Earth 3. She's not been back to Earth 3 necessarily. She could have went to any Earth, but she's fled the Earth into another dimension. Agent Chase is interviewing Lois to start with, and first of all, like there's a moment here in the first page, not the recap or the email page, but the first proper page, where Lois is meant to be like sort of puffing, right? As if she's like going pff, right? And the way it's shown visually, it makes it look like she's got like a bat signal coming out of her mouth.
Until I saw the sound effect that is next to it, I thought she was spitting, because it looks like a solid thing, like not just some gas. It's got like really straight lines. If you're puffing, I feel like it's a bit more effervescent.
Aye, but it's going up the way, which makes it look more like a light. It looks like a beam of light coming out of her mouth.
Yeah.
The art in this has been with these Romita Jr. issues is basically horrendous from start to finish, and there's the only levels of like it only ranges from really bad to absolutely horrendously bad, and there's some in between of that. But because as bad as this first page is, and this first page is really bad, there is worse. There's worse later on.
Oh, there is, yeah.
Where it bothered me even more.
I also had just a maybe this is partly me missing it, but the font that they use to establish things here is that a consistent thing all run, or is it just the FBI now?
No, that's been consistent. Yeah.
Okay, because on like 2 pages later, it says, oh, actually, this is Metropolis 2 hours ago, but it's the yellow with the red outline, and it's pasted sideways along a big, tall, thin panel that is mostly red. I didn't actually see those words because my eyes glossed over them because it was just red and it was vertical in a vertical panel. So I didn't notice that there was words because it didn't stand out. So a few panels later, when it was like Lois is being arrested, I was like, wait, what's going on here? Like, where's this timeline? What's happening? And it took me a good 20 seconds to find that text on the page. I didn't know if that was unique to this issue or if it was like a consistent choice. So they were just trying to make the best of it.
Well, I can't remember if that problem pops up before, but I mean that font's been consistent.
Okay.
For the captions. Kara has to go grab Superman, who's basically lost the fight with Red Cloud, while the Superboys distract Red Cloud best they can. This is some of the stuff where I'm like, I'm looking at this fight in some of these panels and some of these pages, and I'm like, I can only imagine how good this fight might be if there was actually good art. Like, if there was a good artist actually doing this.
There was there's the page where it's the words are all broken up into individual bubbles. It's like, hey brain, you got, or whatever,
Yeah, the idea is that they're going around in circles, so every time they do a full round, every time they come back round, they're getting one word out, and then they're going zoop. So hey, zoop brain, zoop you. Right. And so the actual lettering there and the way the bubbles are laid out actually does create that effect quite well.
It does, and that wasn't going to be my problem. I think on that particular panel, is that Connor Kent on the top, I'm assuming, because of the darker?
Yes, that's Connor at the top.
Why are his hands all like tucked into his chest as he's flying? Like in the because I went back and checked the page before, they are spread, pushed forward like the traditional Superman flying pose, when they're going fast and they're pushing. And that one there, like his arms like he's got little T-Rex arms. Like,
because he's a transformer and he's mid-transformation and he's coming into his chest and he's going to...
I feel like that's as good an explanation as just Romita Jr.
Yes. So they take Red Cloud to the Phantom Zone. Superman wakes up. And they actually give her a choice, and they're like, hey, you can stay here. I did think some of the dialogue here was a little bit out of character for Superman in particular. He feels a bit more, I don't know, vindictive than I would expect Superman to be. Yeah. And I do believe Superman would give her this choice. He's like, hey, your powers are so dangerous that you actually might qualify for staying in the Phantom Zone. And this is basically just like a hell world where some of the worst Kryptonian and superpowered beings have to go because they're just not safe to be anywhere else. And we all accept that. Yeah, you can't just put Zod in a prison on Earth. It just doesn't work, right? But he says, but no, if you make the choice to go serve your time in a human prison and maybe contribute back to society, you can do that, and I'd prefer you to do that. But that's not what he says here. He says, but make no mistake, I don't really care which one you pick. And I was like, that feels a bit dark coming from Clark. I feel like he wouldn't say it that way, but I mean...
Yeah, I think the exact line is, I promise you, I'm okay either way. I'm like...
Yeah, okay. My only explanation for it is that she has just killed someone, like an innocent person that Clark was friends with, so his emotions are a bit heightened. Because I don't mind, later on in the issue, he has a moment where he imagines destroying Star Labs, because they're talking about how Star Labs are at the center of so many things that have happened across Bendis' run, both in Superman Action and also Young Justice. And there's this moment where Superman, it looks like he flies into the building and just disintegrates it with, flies through it with his heat vision. And it's like, this is really out of character, but then it snaps back and it's like, oh, he's just thinking about it, he's just imagining it. And I'm like,
I laughed really hard on that page when he's doing that, because you've got John going like, Dad, and I was just hearing it as the Snake from the Game Over on Metal Gear. Those shouts. That's how it read to me, and I couldn't stop laughing as I was reading it.
And I have no problem with Superman being angry enough that he has a thought like this. He would never act on it, but I have no problem with him having the thought and working through it, because that's just human. It's human to have an anger and have to fantasize about the most extreme callback or revenge you could have, and then go, no, but this is why I won't do that because I'm a human being and I'm empathetical and I'm level-headed and so on and so on. So that's fine, but yeah, some of his dialogue with Red Cloud earlier on, who does clearly make the choice to go to a human prison, because we see her in one such prison, with a device on her, which is clearly dampening her powers, which, by the way, might be the worst looking page of the whole book to me. I think the art in that page is absolutely horrendous.
I think there are worse panels, but because that is a full page on its own, yeah, it's pretty bad.
I don't understand, like, she has no shoulders for a start. All the lines in the jumpsuit and on her face, like, why is her face so liney?
Shadows. I don't know.
I don't understand. She's got like lines going across her face all the way up and down, like, or across the way, but they're all the way down her face. So I don't understand. I don't understand why this looks so bad. She gets a letter from Leon, who's left her a letter saying, "Hey, we controlled the streets. We had one rule: don't fight Superman. You broke that rule. You let Lex Luthor get into your head. And I just want you to know that if I find a version of you in whatever new Earth I'm on, I'm going to ruin her as quickly as possible because you've pissed me off." Is basically the sentiment. Yeah, Brainy goes back to the future. John says, "I'll see you there in a day." Although it's time travel, so why does he have to be there a day later? Why can't he just travel to the same day a day later?
Because apparently he's the timelines are in sync. It's
okay.
It's dark rules, Pete.
Okay, all right, fine. But there is an interesting moment. I feel like this is probably referencing Supergirl's time in the Legion here. Her saying, "I should put, I want to come and visit someday," and Brainy tells her a secret. He's like, "Oh, hey, now you will come and visit. I know that's going to happen," and he tells her a secret about the future.
It feels like a tease for okay, we've got plans for Kara at some point in the next year or so.
That's possible. Part of me was just thinking it was a reference to when she, was kind of like the main character in the Legion.
I mean, it could be just that, but it felt like I don't know. To me, it felt like no, it will still they'll do something like that again.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see. That's assuming that Bendis is even on Legion, because I mean, Young Justice has ended. He's leaving Superman in action soon, so we'll see if he's even on Legion or if a Legion book even exists long enough for plans to actually happen.
Maybe he's going to do a Supergirl book, and he'll just be, that'll just be an arc in the Supergirl book. I don't know.
Who knows? Although Supergirl's face in the panel where Brainy's whispering to her is basically nightmare fuel. Yeah, it's nightmare fuel. I don't know.
She looks like a wax figure.
How is the art? I mean, I know I say this every time, but every time I go to read one of these issues, I am shocked all over again that this can be in a professional sold comic book.
Do you know what I think is the worst part as well? Like it's not like, oh, there's one consistent problem that he's bad at, like, and that's why this looks bad. It's like no. There are like 12 different things that look terrible for all different reasons in this issue. Like there's no consistency to the problems.
End of the issues, they come back to the day of the planet. They've got some news to share. It turns, and I assume this is related to like how he can afford this is related to his miniseries. But Jimmy is the new owner of the Daily Planet, and is now Perry's boss as well as everyone else's. That's the cliffhanger.
Yeah, he was pretty rich by the end of that. I mean, the Olsons were rich anyway. That was a whole big part of that. But he had access. I think they ended with him having access to his part of the trust. He was the only one not broke. The siblings. That was why he was that's why he was targeted for murder anyway, so that his trust would pass to his brother. That was the whole point of the book, essentially.
Yeah, there's a couple of funny beats building up to it where, like, someone says, "Is Lex Luthor the owner of Daily Planet?" And you just hear Perry shout "worse" from his office, and that's pretty funny, because especially because I almost, like, as soon as I heard that, I was like, okay, it's going to be something that's not actually that bad, but it's just funny that Perry thinks it's that bad. So it being Jimmy was amusing.
Honestly, it was like I was like, oh, is Lex Luthor not the boss, not the owner right now? Because that seemed like something that might have happened recently.
Nah, Leon was the boss, but now she's fled.
Right.
So that's where we are. Yeah, this story-wise, I have no problem. I'll on some dialogue from Clark that feels a bit vicious with the Red Cloud. I have no problem from a plot perspective, and that's been kind of a running theme with these Action Comics issues for a while.
You could probably copy and paste your conclusion.
Yeah.
to all of these.
because I think one of the best things that the book's done in the last arc or so was the reveal that Leon came from Earth-3. Like that reveal, when me and Matt like found that out, it was like, oh, that's really cool. That's interesting. That explains why she has this view of Superman and why she acts differently, why she has all these techniques. It was a really interesting dynamic to add into the whole mix. And the story's played out just fine, I think, for the most part. But the art has severely hampered the enjoyment of it consistently throughout. I because every page I turn, I am horrified at what I'm seeing all over again. It is distracting, and some people, and I get why some people might say, "Oh, you're being too harsh." Like, just okay, this is how it looks. Just read the story and be over it. And normally I can. Normally, if there's art that's just not that great, it's just kind of whatever. I can just kind of start ignoring it and just accept it and just read the story. But this art is so distractingly bad that every page I turn to, I'm like,
yeah, I mean, I'm on the record a lot of I don't agree to that train of thought anyway. Of just ignore the art and get over it. I mean, no, the art is half of the story, half of the experience, at least. They're as much a storyteller as the writer in a comic. That's the whole point.
I don't dispute that, but I do think it is possible, if the art's only serviceable, to kind of just then focus on what the story is and not let it sort of like, okay, you have the sort of the it's kind of whatever, but it's not distracting and takes away from the story unless it's actually properly distractingly bad. And that's what I mean. I don't think there's a better example of distractingly bad than John Romita Jr. in his current state.
Yeah, it just baffles me. Like, reading some of his earlier stuff, and it's like, no, he was talented. Like, it looked good. Like, not even like good by Romita standards. Like good. It's like, what happened? What just happened? Where did it go? And the fact that does anyone defend this? I don't know. Like, do people read this now and they go, oh, it looks good? Like, are people still fans of this, or is it just he's getting by on name cred and because it's Action Comics and people are going to buy Action Comics no matter what?
Probably the latter. I don't imagine how many people could defend this. If there is anyone who likes Romita Jr.'s current art, I wouldn't even debate them on it. I mean, first of all, art's super subjective anyway, but I don't think I'd even want to have the conversation because I feel like nothing good's going to come of it, because ultimately I'm just going to have a hard time believing anything you say to me, if I'm honest.
I'd be interested to know why, because I think he still clearly understands the storytelling craft, because I think his layouts are still fine.
Oh, sure,
so
he
okay. Understands the storytelling and the craft of that. Like, he hasn't lost that. That knowledge is still there. I think it just looks like he doesn't have control of the pencil like he used to. I don't know. I don't know what happened. Maybe he's just, I don't know, he got old and lost some of that fine motor skills.
Romita Jr.'s art makes me think that I could make money as a comic book artist. And that's, if you're making me think that, then something's wrong. Because I can't draw for shit.
I'd be really interested to see if I could draw better or worse than this. As someone who hasn't picked up a pencil in over a decade.
Yeah, it's just, there's something to talk about. Even that last page, Superman's like the top right panel, there's just a lot of vertical lines in Superman's outfit, and he's just standing there. There's no motion.
Is that? I think that's John sat next to him on the left.
Yes, I think so.
Looks like he's about 40.
He looks older than Superman in that panel. Yes.
I don't know what's going on there, but he just does.
And Supergirl, I mean, I'm sure she's just floating, and that's why she's taller. But because the way she's off panel and just poking her head in, it looks like she's
leaning
tall.
in, isn't she? Yeah.
It looks like she's super tall compared to Superman. It's weird. Yeah. It's awful. It's awful. I don't know.
And also, just on the final panel, like the very, very final panel with Jimmy Olsen, he's looking down. Jimmy Olsen is he's looking down, wiping his nose and looking, nothing. And then it does the little mini panel, like the close up on his face as he looks up, and he smiles. I feel like that's supposed to be a smirk. Like the moment tells me it's a smirk, but it's not a smirk face.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I'm projecting, but knowing Jimmy, that feels like it should definitely be a smirk.
Nah, that last little panel where he's smiling, it looks like the sort of uncle you want to keep your children away from.
Yeah, yeah.
That's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying. He looks like there should be a restraining order between him and a school. That's all I'm saying. That's actually comics. What are you giving it?
Well, last time I checked, the last time I read an Action Comics issue was 1024. I gave that a 2. Now, I will say this issue was better than that one, because that was the one with all of the really long, terrible dialogue from that random alien race that even you and Matt didn't.
No. That was Superman 25. That wasn't Action.
Superman? Okay. Well, whatever the Action one was then, I had a lot more. I remember having more problems with it. I mean, clearly. That was the one where the character died. They killed someone, and I think you and Matt were both like, "Wait, they actually killed them."
Mm-hmm.
That was that issue. I think this was better than that, so I'll give it a 3.5.
Yeah, I mean, I like the story well enough, for the most part. I feel like every time I say that, it sounds like I'm not super enthusiastic about it, but I don't think it's because the story isn't like good. I think the problem is that the art is like detracting so much from the story that it kind of leaves me with this, like, I think I like the story, but it's hard to actually be sure because the art's ruining it so much. So it's not that I'm just unconfident. Like, if I sound unconfident when I say that, it's because I kind of am, because the art is making it so murky.
If you remove the context and just work through the core beats in your head, do you like those beats? And it's the execution that's failed, essentially.
Yeah, but
the execution in the art side as well.
But it's hard to kind of separate that sometimes. But yeah, what would I usually give this? Like a 5? Like a 4 or 5?
I don't think I pay attention.
I'll go the 4.5. 4.5, which is the third book this week that's been in the 4s for me.
It's not a good week, is it?
It's not, yes, it's been a very up and down week. Justice League Dark issue 28, Ram V writing with Amancay and Nahuelpan on the art. Take it away, Connor.
Yeah, so this is the final issue of this part of the run. This is the last of the Upside Down Men. All that stuff is wrapped up here. It does conclude in a mostly quite satisfying way. It's pretty solid. We open with where we left off last time. Zatanna and the Upside Down Man are sharing a body because of the magic thing she did, and they're basically inside. They're in like a mind space that they're both sharing, because they're sharing the same body, the same mind right now. So they have like this internal battle, like this a bit of a dialogue, and then they have like a battle of the wills, as we kind of called it in Wonder Woman. And the Upside Down Man tries to absorb Zatanna. It's like, I'm going to steal all your memories and make it so that you're nothing. You're not even going to be an afterthought in my mind. You're just going to be an echo. And we see a lot. Some of these beats from Zatanna. This gorgeous, like, his jaw opens up really wide, and you have like all these memories being sucked out of Zatanna's mouth, and we are all these moments. Really gorgeous layout stuff. Looks great. And that's the first couple of pages, is all that stuff in the mind. And then we cut back to I won't say the real world, but the other dimension that they're in, where they're fighting the Upside Down Man. And he seemingly wins the fight, because we see him transform. Zatanna's skin gets shed away, and he becomes just the Upside Down Man again. Except, then starts fighting the others, and Diana's like, no, you haven't won yet. Haven't you realized you're standing the right way up? She's still in there. There's still a part of her making that decision. So again, this is where it cuts back into his head, and it's Zatanna be like, no, I can do this. I've got to just focus on one memory, one clear, real memory, and kind of make that a thing, and kind of bring that memory to life. And it comes back to a beat that was earlier in the book. The first trick that her dad taught her was the rabbit in the hat, where it's a dead rabbit, and he puts it in, and out comes a real rabbit, an alive rabbit. But ultimately, it is actually just a trick, and there's still just a dead rabbit in the dark somewhere. And that memory of her for the first time bringing an actual rabbit back to life, with real magic, not stage magic. And her father being like, no, there's always a cost, and I'll take that, and he takes that cost. And that was a big part of the run earlier, and that's it. This is where she wins. This core belief permeates so much that it kind of infects the Upside Down Man so much to the point where no, magic has a cost, and because magic has a cost, his power is false. So he kind of loses, and the body almost explodes. It's like a shedding of the skin with an explosion sort of effect, and it's Zatanna kind of underneath, and shedding the Upside Down Man's skin. And it's brilliant, and there's just a little part of him still in there, but Diana like locks him away with Hecate's magic, and that's most of that stuff. We kind of then transition into the epilogue of this part of the run, where it's Bobo is back in the Oblivion Bar. He's got it all running up again, and he's serving Khalid a drink. Because Khalid's kind of forgotten a lot of the story. He took a big hit to the head, and a lot of this is kind of fuzzy for him. So he remembers parts, but the rest of this is Boba kind of just filling him in on the story. Acknowledges that Ken is gone. He is fate now, but something's wrong for whatever reason. Naboo's not talking to him, so it's just a ornamental helmet right now. But Bobo's like, hey, me and you both know that seems great. It seems like you've got to rest right now, but that's not the reality of it. You're going to have to be ready. So you better get this sorted soon. And that's kind of his epilogue. You have a little bit of Bobo again telling the story of what happened. This world that they created where Swamp Thing, they infused all the Swamp Thing's being and life force into it, and to bring it life and to give it stability and rules. Has reforged the Nightmaster's sword, and they decide to call the place New Mirror. So that's back now. Man-Bat's really struggling with what he's done because he feels guilty because he's the one who created this kind of virus essentially that made Swamp Thing do what he did, and he's the one who had to inject Swamp Thing with it. And again, not that Swamp Thing wasn't willing, that he made that sacrifice, but he's still feeling guilty about having done it. But he finds some evidence that there is still a consciousness buried deep within the green there, waiting to be reformed. And then the big one that comes last is Zatanna is there crying over Constantine's dead body. He is dead at this point. Then her father is there, freed from this torment of what had gone on with the Upside Down Man at last. And they have one final moment, and he does what he did with the rabbit, whereas take this cost and let it be born onto me, and that's it. And he leaves and dies for good this time, and so Constantine can come back. And just there's a wonderful panel of her just crying into his chest, and him just it is a completely silent panel, but just that moment of after her father has finally died. It's a great moment. You could just the final epilogue part that is after Bobo's story. This is while he's just telling Khalid about hey, you should probably get on with fixing that. It's just Diana and Zatanna having a little meeting on a rooftop. She's clear of Hecate's mark, but hey, the world will always need heroes, so we'll be there when it's ready. And the final page is a man walking out the shadows with a cane with a chain on that. I don't recognize off the top of my head. I don't know if this is a thing or not. It might be, or it is possible that maybe I was wrong when I said in another book earlier that this might actually be tied to Endless Winter. I don't know. But this man looks like an elderly man walking with a cane, all in black, big like feather cloak almost around his neck, and this pendant silver with a couple of symbols on it, a couple of hammers, daggers, such like that. And then he just explodes into ravens or crows, perhaps. I'm not entirely sure. That's the final bit. This shadowy figure exploding into these dark birds, and then continues in Endless Winter, which I'm very excited for. As we'll get to next week, I'm sure where that starts. But honestly, this book, it does everything it kind of needs to do to wrap up this story at last. None of it is out, a surprise. There's no big shocking beats in this issue. There's nothing that catches you off guard. It is very much wrapping up the conclusion. Here's what we need to do, which makes it a little bit less exciting than some of the other issues, for sure. But it also leaves me very excited for what we've got coming up in the next stage of the run, where Ramvi can really, for the first time now, he gets to start and do his own thing from scratch. Maybe he might be reforging the team, because they are all off doing their own thing right now. So he might have a completely new lineup when we come back in March. I don't know yet. It seems likely. But it's really exciting that, Ramvi gets to start from scratch now and do what he wants instead of tying up Tynan's run, which, again, he's done a great job with. It's a task that no one really wants to do in comics. No one wants to come in and finish off someone else's story, I'm sure. They want to tell their own. But judging what he's been doing in the first few issues of Catwoman with his own material from scratch, I'm very excited to see what he does in the next stage of this book. This is a solid 8 still. Yeah, actually, I'll give it an 8.5 because there are some really nice artistic touches, some great layouts, some gorgeous coloring as well. Especially the stuff in the other world really stands out. So yeah, 8.5.
All right. Batman Superman issue 14, Joshua Williamson writing with the Max Raynor on the art, wrapping up this Brainiacs infected their security system. The issue opens with like a flashback to when Batman's suggesting they create this predictive system, and Superman points out that every time this has happened that it's ended up going bad and tries to fight them, and Batman's like, no, it'll be different this time for this reason. So it all has this air of like kind of like meta comedy to it that this has happened again.
Yeah, it doesn't make the arc that much more enjoyable though. It feels like a little bit too late of this awareness. I
appreciated it on its own as a scene, rather than necessarily elevating anything that was happening. The actual action of the scene was fine. Like I hate to not like have another book to like praise and be super positive on. I don't have like super negative thoughts on this either. You've got the composite, the Batman Superman robot that's on Earth on Metropolis. Superman flies down to try and take that on. I did get a little giggle out of the little girl yelling "Superman kick his ass" as she's been carted off by her parents. And meanwhile, Batwoman's fighting a bunch of robots while stealing Batman or hacking in and trying to go into the VR version of Gotham that this computer uses to run things. And Batman and Superman basically both ask it questions on either side. One on Earth, one on the moon, and essentially distract it just long enough for Steel to do his hacking.
Download its consciousness away from the body that it is on Earth into the Joker head somehow. I don't really know. Yeah,
the Joker robot head. Yeah, it was all a bit much in terms of like trying to follow exactly what the plan was. It made Batwoman look strong, because they looked over and there's just a pile of robots, and she's
on of bodies.
I kind of like the joke of that, of like, just sort of like, it's like, oh, you two are going to play video games, but I have to do all the fighting figures. And then we just don't see her again, and then when we see her again at the end, she's on a mountain of like robot bodies that she's taken out herself. Like, it's a fun little, like, hey, she's a badass. And
yeah, I kind of wish that every so often she was in the background of one of the panels with like Steel and Batman talking. Just in the background, she was off fighting a robot, but it was always just smoke, dirt,
Yeah. Superman has to come back and save them because the entire moon base is starting to break apart. It's like, well, we're either going to, die of exposure or whatever. Like we're doomed. And Superman comes.
So we're going to suffocate or freeze.
I do
be crushed by the maze.
I do like that they put the data onto an old computer, like an old like 80s looking computer. I almost feel like there's potential here to do like a war game style thing with this computer later.
The only problem I have is that seemingly is how it starts, because it's on a little screen and it's with the green text, activate Y/N. I'm like, well, it got off one of these in the first place.
This one's not connected to anything though. I think what Batman points out, it's
okay, fair enough.
This is not connected to the internet, so they can get away with it. And there's a bit, there's a joke at the end where Batman's like, okay, well now we can start like fixing the Batcave. We just have to clear this debris, the plane wreckage. And he still like, sorry, got to tell my niece to crash her spaceship. Superman's like, oh, I hear something in Metropolis. And then Batman's just like, nope. Like they all two have excuses, she's just like, no. not happening. They give me a minor chuckle.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a solid 6 out of 10. It's fine.
That's pretty much where I'm going to land as well. I like the acknowledgement that they didn't just happen to, it wasn't just stealing baton randomly intercepting the signals. I know they sent it to them in particular because they thought they would be reasonably good successors to their roles, essentially.
Yes.
I thought that was a nice acknowledgement.
Yes, we're getting Solomon Grundy next time, apparently. So hopefully that'll be fun. I've been liking this book. This was maybe more of a down arc than a big arc, but they tend to only be 3 issues long, give or take. So
yeah, this book, like the first arc with the Secret Six stuff was, whatever.
I'm not counting that. Yeah, we've talked about that before.
Since it's became what the book actually is, where it's just these small little random stories, they've all been really fun. This is the first one where I felt disappointed by it. Not that it's bad, but disappointed just in what this book has set up as its expectations as to what its base level is of these stories. This was definitely my least favorite by quite a distance. So I'm hoping we're back up on the next one.
Yeah, it's just another typical superhero story with tropes that doesn't amount to much. It's not going to be remembered, and that's okay. It's fine. Whatever. We can move on. So yeah, that's basically it. Obviously, that's a very quick discussion on it, but there's not really a whole lot to say. I don't have a whole lot to go into. So that is Batman Superman. Which takes us on to the Patreon books that we've got this month. So Car can start off. So I mentioned this earlier, but every month on patreon.com/MailFuzzTV that some of our higher tiers get to make myself or Connor read a book. So Connor is going to be reading, he's already read, but he's going to be discussing Undiscovered Country issue 10. So take it away.
Yeah, written by Scott Snyder and Charles Soule, still art by Giuseppe Camuncoli, and Leonardo Marcello Grassi has been helping out on this arc. Although I will say, because there's a letter in the back, as I'm sure there often is in these issues, because that tends to be a common thing in the back matter of Image books. But Soule had the letter on this issue. I was talking about the plotting of the next arc, and definitely referred to it as his, Snyder's, and Camuncoli's book. Like, it's their baby. So I think Grassi, I don't know if he's going to be sticking around on the next arc, or if he's just helping out on this, but definitely doesn't seem to be involved on the conceptual level in the same way, at least. It's thought worth noting. The book does open with like a bit of a flashback. 17 years ago, it's the woman from Unity kind of basically trying to convince the president that that Unity needs more resources, and you've got Sam Elgin, who's like the main advisor to the president, kind of being like, no, this isn't how Aurora works. The whole point of Aurora, and you should know this, you were in it from the beginning, is you all get equal rights, equal property, equal resources. You do your thing with what you can, and we'll bring it together at the end. And she's like, yeah, but look, I'm so close. I just need a bit more. And all the other states are like, well, no, that sounds terrible. This is your dream. That's not ours. It's not fair for you to be taking away our resources. And Elgin basically agrees with them. He's like, you got to make do with what you got. Shut it down. You got, but does kind of relent and go, like, you got 1 year to try before you have to shut down, but try and do it within these means. Stop, going over. And this is pretty relevant for later, towards the end of the issue. But then we actually cut back to present day Unity. We're with Ace and Valentina. They're off in their little boat doing an exploratory mission. As where they left last time. They're off to find the source of this big energy reading that happened however many years ago. That it was one of the only energy events that was large enough to be detected by the outside world. And he's like, hey, it's pretty close to here, so I feel like we should. And they get to this huge dead body in the ocean. And from later inferences, I think it's supposed to be a whale. But the part of it we see, it looks like a T-Rex head. Like that's what visually it looks like. But it tells me after it's supposed to be a whale. So I'm going with it. It's a whale. But there's a huge bite missing out of it. And when I say it's a whale, it's enormous. Like, they're in like a van-sized vehicle, and it barely even covers like the first 2 teeth of its mouth. Like, if it was going to be put in the mouth, it would barely cover like the first bit of the jaw. I mean, it's nothing. And as soon as they're like, well, what took a bite out of it? lo and behold, a big, massive shark appears. A few of them, in fact. And instead of being the white things that all the Unity constructs are this white material, that nanotech stuff, these sharks are black. And they're like, oh, do they remind you what we saw back in Destiny? And it feels like a bit of an easy leap for them to get there, personally. But obviously, as readers, we know this is because Destiny infected the Unity stuff at the end of the last issue. So they're kind of running away. They're carrying on towards their mission, and they get to a recreation of the White House, just in the middle of the middle of the ocean here. And they're like, but it's walled off. Like, how do we get past the wall? And then the shark takes a bite out of the wall pretty conveniently. So in they go. And there's a hologram of Elgin inside. And it's like, hey, fancy you being here. Jane, the Unity woman, must be really distracted, or you wouldn't have made it. You're absolutely the right people for this job. Aurora did a great job picking you guys. There are some answers in there, but be careful. I haven't really got any control here. So just good luck. And it ends it by saying, this land is her land instead of our land. And before I get to the beats with them, because that is the conclusion, I'm going to rewind and do the other half of the issue, which is Destiny and some other black creature beings are attacking Unity City. You've got them trying to defend it. The Unity woman Jane basically takes control. Like, she can shut down, override all of the constructs, all the people, everything. She can kind of become an autocratic dictator. It's very much a dictator in the Roman sense. I can't remember what the word they. I don't know if it was dictator they used then, but in the idea of, okay, in times of great crisis, we can't have a council. We can't have various leaders, pre-Senate, I don't know what it was, but we need a one person to lead us through this, and she becomes that, and and wins, and it works. She fights through the army because she has this complete control, and there is no opposing views. There's no dissension. It is, as she puts it, one America, indivisible. And the art's great for all this stuff, actually. It's a blast. One nation, indivisible, sorry, is what she uses. But the rest of the group are mostly quite horrified by this because, you're just taking control of all these people. They didn't have a choice in any of this. But Chang has maybe been a little bit infected by it because he gets affected as well at some point, but makes a point of saying that he actually kind of agrees with what she's done here, and makes a point of saying, this is his own free will. It's not because he's infected, but he understands it. The idea of the two sides that they have now. It's not about winning. It's not about bettering. It's not about doing the right thing. It's about beating the other side. It's about the other side losing is the measure of victory, and doing it this way gets rid of that. There is one cohesive goal for them to work towards, and and that's kind of the beat it leaves it on for there, where it's like, I think it's the final line from him is, I think it's beautiful, that concept, and that's where it does cut back now to the other two who are off in the not White House in the middle of the ocean, and they're walking to this room, and this is presumably what's powering Unity. This is what has created this technology and allows it to work. And it's just a wall full of brains, hundreds of them hooked up. And they're like, they're really small brains. So they animal brains? And like, no. And then, we hear a voice. It's like, no, animal brains aren't sophisticated enough. They're humans. And they're small because they're young. Because the young brains would, conduct what we needed better, because fewer pathways set through lived experiences. They're not enough. We don't have to override data. We can work with them. They're more malleable from the start. And we see what I think might be the real version of Jane. It's hard to say for now, because she looks almost skeletal, like ancient, long flow hair. She's in like a coffin-style cocoon with lots of wires coming out of it that act like legs. Think like giant spider legs almost. It's a hell of an image. And that's how this is how Unity's worked. It's at a price of hundreds of these young lives have been just these brains that are farmed and used to feed what they were, and this contrasts really nicely with Chang on the previous couple of pages being like, no, I get it, I understand this mentality, and that was just at the cost of putting someone in charge that can overwrite and take away the choice. But now we're seeing the reality of it here is this is the cost of it, and it's pretty horrifying stuff. Really interested to see what they do with it next. I do think this was a slightly less appealing issue than some of the other ones that we've had recently. I think just it's a lot of action, and the reveals are really interesting, but it doesn't have time to explore them yet and play with the ideas, which has been what this book has been best at, has been exploring these ideals, these American ideals, and twisting them in unique ways. And this issue sets up what it's going to be twisting and playing with next, but doesn't actually get to do much of it yet, which is a little bit underwhelming, I guess I'd say, in that sense. But all the action, the art that is there is pretty great. So I'm still going to give it a 7.5, I think. Still a very good issue.
All right, cool. That'll take me on to Animal Man issue 3, which is my Patreon book that I'm doing today. Obviously Grant Morrison, who I have got some problems with this issue. I need to pull him up for let's just say there's a cat in this issue who is fed to some rabid dogs, and I'm not happy about it. I was deeply disturbed, and this will not stand. Grant Morrison, how dare you?
I'm pretty sure that's the point.
How dare you, Grant?
Frankly, all cats should be done that.
You shut your filthy ginger mouth, you little weasel.
World would be a better place.
So, yeah, where to begin with this? So, last issue, if you remember, Buddy got his arm ripped off. that was how we ended that issue. One of a couple of different extreme cliffhangers we had. And in some cases, the other one actually goes more extreme than it ended with. But the Buddy arm one, I don't know if we actually came up with this solution, but he actually takes power from earthworms that he senses underground.
I think I did mention. I think I mentioned lizards or something.
Yeah, and he regrows his arm, which is a delightfully weird page, a couple of pages even, where there's like a panel where his fingers aren't all there yet; they're just little stubs, and then they sort of come in, and then he's like, "Holy shit! I just grew an arm back. This is weird." And the rat monster is turned back into the homeless person that it was. So he's like, okay, this is weird. I need to go back to Star Labs, find out what's going on. This is downright surreal. But what this issue really does in terms of the main plot is that it really gives us the idea of who the Beast is and some of his backstory. And we get to see him properly. I can't say that visually he's what I was expecting. So he's known in the world as the White God of Kilimanjaro, and although obviously we refer to him as a beast, he wears what's essentially a Mexican wrestling mask and has like a red and white loincloth with like red and yellow boots, and otherwise is naked. Like, it's not what I was expecting.
Yeah, this is the Moana beast, right?
Yeah. So, was not expecting this, I have to say. Not being super familiar with this character, prior to this run. So visually a bit odd, given that I wasn't, I don't know what I was expecting, but it'd been so secretive up until this point, and so like, oh, in the shadows, who is this beast? He's coming. And we get some of the backstory of like his friend being shot by militants, and even like, and the reason why he's in California is because Star Labs has this ape that he's friends with, essentially. I mean, maybe that's making it a bit too simplistic, but they have him at Star Labs, and this ape is been tested on, has a strain of anthrax that they're using. They're developing this really nasty thing, actually, where they're trying to create a version that will attack livestock to like go after like enemies' livestock, but will not be dangerous to humans, so that their own forces can go in at the same time. They've not gotten to that point though. So when the beast grabs the ape, and runs off by the end of the issue into the city and goes to the zoo, as we find out. It's like, oh, California might actually be uninhabitable in a couple of weeks' time if this is not contained quick enough, because this is how severe this is. So we're dealing with a possible pandemic, which of course feels very topical right now. So that's kind of the goals here. But yeah, so yeah, the Doctor actually admits a lot of this to Buddy. He admits that they stole this ape that has a special kind of, you know, the scientists were referring to him as the missing link for a while. I think I said he. I think it's actually a she. But basically doing this horrible testing. And the first time we see this ape early in the issue, she does have like boils. She has like stuff all over her body. It looks quite nasty. It does not look pleasant. It does feel kind of vicious, and in a way where, while obviously you're on Buddy's side about protecting the city and protecting everyone, you don't necessarily empathize with the scientists here. You do feel like, hey, the Beast has got a bit of claim here to be upset. You know, not create rat monsters and start ripping off people's arms upset, but you get the conflict. You get what's going on. And Buddy's not happy about it either. Buddy really goes in. Dr. Myers, his name is. He yells at him. He gives him what for. And Beast is like holding the ape at the Juba is the ape's name. Holding the ape at the zoo, and the ape's crying. Beast is crying, and ultimately we just see like all the other apes at the zoo crying, and it ends with this angry page of Beast just like standing up and yelling out, do you know what it is? It's that moment in Superman the movie where Lois, and this is reversed, spoilers for the movie by the way, but Lois technically dies and Superman just sort of looks up and yells. It's basically that. And it's like, oh wait, he was dangerous before, like what's he going to do now? Like just last issue he fused a rat into a person's face and turned them into a rat monster. Like what's he going to do now? And does he have the anthrax strain? Is he going to be spreading that around as he goes? Really, and the ape's red, by the way. It's just worth mentioning. It's a red ape, which is a bit unique. Typically, if you're not familiar with apes, they'll typically come in a red.
Orangutans are fairly reddish.
This isn't an orangutan though. This is. I mean, I don't know if it's meant to be a specific ape per se, but it's.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
I haven't read this issue in years.
But. So that's kind of where the main story is going. Interesting stuff. It's probably my least favorite of the main story threads thus far, just because it is kind of the more here's like explanations, here's where he comes from. I do like the adding the moral sort of like side to it, where wait, no, like we the people in San Diego are kind of at fault for this, or the people of Star Lab specifically are at fault for this. They've done something to wrong him and wrong the natural balance of things.
Pretty sure that's a recurring theme through Morrison's run.
I suspect it will be, especially given that Buddy, can feel what the animals are feeling. Given that, I think a lot of him.
Yeah, and I could be wrong. I'm pretty sure Grant Morrison's a vegan as well. Like it's done a lot of campaigning against like animal testing, for example. So this is all very personal for him. Yeah,
it does not surprise me if that's the case. But. So the other plot though from last issue, which you may remember, because I did not see it going that way, where Ellen ended up in the woods with these like guys with guns who it started to feel very rapey, right? Like that's what the threat was as we cut away at the end of last issue. So they're the ones who like throw a cat to, because there was kittens that were found before. They throw a kitten to some rabid dogs. Why obviously it was implied where it was going with this. And Maxine runs back and gets the neighbor, because I remember I mentioned last issue that the neighbor was sort of like outside, sort of like sunbathing or relaxing, and that's who ultimately comes to save her. He comes in with his gun and kind of scares the others off. There's a bit more to it that I'll get to in a second, but obviously this is cutting between this and the main story, and it comes back to this story at one point, and it legitimately like has a panel of the main dude, the main sort of bad guy here with the gun, unbuckling his belt. Like it's being very, it's not hiding it. It's not trying to dance around what he's trying to do. Everything he's saying is very, he's implying things. He's saying, "Oh, you're all the same. You always have a headache, or you want to watch TV." No. He's very and it's actually the entire time as this is going on, the guy that's with him keeps saying, "This is going too far. Stop this." He's constantly trying to talk him out of whatever he's doing. He says it about the cat. He says it when he's walking towards her. And then he tries to aim his gun at the neighbor when the neighbor's there to try and defend her. And it's actually his friend who shoots the main bad guy and puts him down. So, and everyone's crying. It's this really dark scene where she starts like hitting the dead body with she grabs like a stick, like a tree branch, and just starts hitting it and crying, and damn you bastard, because she's been through this traumatic ordeal, and the neighbor's just kind of like, hey, you don't want to see Maxine, you don't want Maxine to see like this, right? And she sort of like calms down. She's still got tears in her eyes, and the whole thing is just very like I did not expect this run to go to this dark place this quickly. Very out of nowhere, and the entire time Buddies doesn't even know anything's at fault. He doesn't know anything's going on. He's too wrapped up in the actual superhero plot of things, which does have its dark elements as well, of course. Like I say, all the stuff with the ape was immediately very kind of troubling, and like this is kind of disgusting and feels very barbaric what they're doing to it. But I don't know, it's hitting some really harsh beats like immediately. In a way that I wasn't expecting. So as much as I'm saying some of this issue is a bit more generic in the sense that, hey, we're having to explain the backstory of the villain, who, by the way, is flying around. I'm sure there's a mythical name for this, but it's a lion with wings.
That's a griffin.
Griffin, there you go.
I think.
That sounds right. That sounds right. I've heard griffin before. I did not feel confident to actually remember what this was called.
No.
But yeah. So he's got that back in Kilimanjaro, but obviously the storytelling is pretty flawless for the most part, because the opening where we see this ape, because the ape as well is like watching from its cage the dead like chimps or whatever else they've got being carted out in like a trolley. Like they've just put like the dead chimp in a trolley and they're like carting it out, and this ape is looking through the bars and crying. So the art is very good, but it's a nice contrast though, because it's flipping between like, because the ape's red, and then the other panels in this page, which is it's a 9-panel grid, the beast is all in blue. Now obviously he's not typically blue, it's just lit that way, if you will. But the narration says the beast is coming, the beast who walks, but it's saying this over the crying face of this ape who's clearly sick, who's clearly got these boils and is crying as it watches these other chimps and whoever have been taken away in a cart because they're dead. They've been experimented on to death. It is a contrast. There's a contrast, and it kind of like immediately sets up this tone that the beast is coming, but the beast's like goal or motivation isn't actually like villainous. That there's something here, like it's vengeful, and the vengeance makes sense, but it immediately sort of tries to challenge how you're like perceiving the villain, if you will. And again, if you want to use the word villain, maybe it's a bit too murky at this point to actually outright say that. But yeah, I will say the look of Blana Beast, not my favorite. I'll say
just how he looks.
I will
do about it.
I will say I do love it for the rest of the issue. Buddy's jacket's like missing a sleeve, because obviously when his arm get ripped off, the sleeve went with it, and then he grew the arm back, but the sleeve's not there, so he's just walking around with one sleeve. It's just one of those consistency things that I
should have ripped the other one off to match.
But then he'd be a douchebag with his sleeves ripped off.
Not in the 80s, he wouldn't.
Nah. I think that was a douchebag thing in the 80s. I think if I was of a reasonable age in the 80s, I think I would have thought people who ripped their sleeves off were douchebags. That's my assumption anyway. I think that's what I would think.
I think you may be right, but I think it's inherently a less douchebaggy thing to do it then, because everyone was doing it. If you do it now, it's way worse. Well,
now it's like retro and like
it's retro douchey.
It's retro and it's like, okay, you're doing something with nostalgia there. The equivalent today is what? Someone who I don't know.
We don't pay attention to the current fashion trends enough, clearly.
I was going to go with a fashion thing, but I don't know, someone who like I don't know, TikToks. I don't know. I don't know what you compare it to. The kids today with the talks and their ticks and their
all that newfangled nonsense
and their Insta tumblers and whatnot. I've actually had an Instagram account and even looked at Tumblr on the occasion. I don't really understand Tumblr, I have to admit. I don't understand the purpose of Tumblr. But...
Yeah, I technically have an Instagram account just because it's Facebook, basically, so it's all linked. I've never used it. I've never posted anything. I've never looked at it on it. I think I've liked it. I got one thing for like a competition on it or something. Tumblr I've used to get GIFs. I've Googled for a specific GIF, and it's given me a thing, and it's on Tumblr. That's about it.
But it's worth mentioning there's some correlation between the two plots here of the viciousness, but basically the cruelty of man, which is a really broad theme, admittedly. So you can sort of like almost take anything with a villain in it and sort of apply the cruelty of man to it. But I do think there's some correlation between the two plots, and the animalistic. I hate to use that word in this, given what we're talking about, but
it's a bit easy.
Yeah, but the point being is that when we talk about someone being an animal, we're not really comparing them to an animal per se, but use being an animal to mean acting without thought or conscience or reason. Yeah, just acting on instinct, for your own gain. So, I think those elements are there. It does play with coloring very well, and I think all the emotional beats are handled very well. The best scene in it is probably when the potential rapist is shot by his friend, who basically is not willing to let this happen, or anyone else to get hurt. So, yeah. But no, issue 3 goes to a dark place, and definitely leaves me wondering like what issue 4 is going to have with the beast being unhinged and possibly just out for blood at this point, because now his friend is gone. So yeah, we'll see. I'll probably give that. I'll probably give it the 8 still. Well, I think the main story's down a little bit. I think the other stuff and the way it handles some of the darker bits, again, sort of counterbalance and get me back to an 8. So that's where I'll leave off on that. But that'll take us to the part of the show where we pick our favourite stuff of the week, favourite panel / moment, favourite cover, favourite art, and top 5 books. And what a weird top 5 it's going to be this week. But we'll start off with panel / moment. What you got?
It's definitely from Justice League Dark. There's 2 moments I could pick. I think I'm going to go with Zatanna shedding the skin of the Upside Down Man, the explosive pop, the skin kind of being there, the colors. It's all fantastic.
Yeah, I don't have like a super obvious thing to go with this week. I think probably be from Wonder Woman. It's probably going to be the. It feels a bit cheap to say something that essentially lasted like 10 pages, but it's probably one of the moments from the battle of wits, the battle of the mind power as she's trying to like fight it. But maybe specifically the sword being heavy moment. I think it was really fun and inventive, because it wasn't just stop doing this thing. He started to try and make other things like elements of what she was doing, like, and use them specifically. I think I appreciate that more than just stop what you're doing. So I'll go with that. But admittedly, I do think like a good half or so of my books this week were just bad. So
I'm looking at the scores I've given. I've only have 2 books, not counting the Patreon book at the end there. I only have 2 books that are a 7 or above.
What's your cover?
My cover. I was looking at these, so just give me a second. It comes down to, I think it's there's like a few nice ones actually. There's a surprisingly nice variant on Action Comics.
That's because it's Gary Frank.
It. And then then I was like, oh, who's this? And I saw Gary Frank. I was like, that's quite nice. There's the standard for me now, the Middleton variant for Wonder Woman, which I'll probably go with. Let's be honest. I'm still that. But I do want to acknowledge I did like the Hitch variant on Batman Superman. I like the variant on Suicide Squad as well. Jeremy Roberts, the Harley one.
The Suicide Squad variant is good. I think I prefer the main cover though for Suicide Squad, which is probably one of the ones I was thinking. I'm probably going to go with the action variant though. Despite everything else with that book, a variant from Gary Frank on a Superman book with the whole Super family is quite nice. So hard to really be upset at that.
I think the reason I didn't choose that and chose the Wonder Woman one instead is I don't really like John's outfit with all the weird lines. I know that's not Gary Frank's fault, not at all. Just don't like it.
That's fair. I'm not a big fan of the Wonder Woman variant this time, to be honest. Middleton's oddly.
Really?
I'm really hit and miss with Middleton. Sometimes there's something just off about it. Like I see what it's going for, and there's just something not clicking. There's just something a little bit off about it. And not always. Sometimes he knocks it out of the park, but sometimes I feel kind of disconnected from the cover.
I get it.
And this is one of those times. Not that the general art isn't pretty enough. It's always the face. It's always the face just feels a bit off to me whenever I don't like it.
I think what it is basically he uses different models as the face depending on the pose. That he's not tracing. I'm not accusing but clearly there's the model he's basing it off of because it's a very realistic drawing, right? And I guess the face doesn't line up with your expectation of Diana always.
Yeah, I guess it's partly that. Yeah, because the body looks fine. Obviously, the actual art and the shading and the colors and all that stuff all looks good. I can't fault any of that. But so yeah, variant of the Action Comics for me, Gary Frank. All right, best art of the week.
Suicide Squad.
Yeah, Suicide Squad. I don't even have to really think about it. And then rank your top 5.
Yeah. Justice League Dark, Suicide Squad, Wonder Woman, Batman, Superman. I'm stopping there because I can't choose. I mean,
you're such a coward.
I mean, I guess that the Death Metal one shot was better than Action Comics, but I mean,
such a coward. You always just refuse to round out the list, even if you have to put the bad ones. All right, my top 5.
Integrity.
Yeah, sure. My top 5 is Suicide Squad at number 1, pretty easily. Wonder Woman at number 2, and then Batman Superman at number 3. After that, I mean, my choices are Action Comics, the Metal one shot, or the Flash.
I don't remember what you gave Flash. You gave Action a 4.5 because you were a point above me, and you gave Death Metal a 4 because that was the same as me. I don't know what you gave Flash, so yeah, I was up for you to call.
On principle, I'll go Metal one shot, then Flash. I'm not ranking Action Comics. I can't do it. The art's just that bad. But let it be known, those last 3 are all pretty down in the dumps, and
it wasn't the best week, was it?
It was an odd week. It was an odd week. Hopefully next week is better, which I'm going to tell you about.
It's not many books, but they look like they might be high quality.
Yes. So we'll have a look here and see what's coming next time. So we have Batman 104. We have Strange Adventures issue 7. Deceased Dead Planet issue 6, Batman Catwoman issue 1, that's finally starting. We got another Tom King 12 issue a minute ago. We have Tales from the Dark Multiverse, War of the Gods issue 1. And then aside from that, we have Justice League Against Winter, issue 1, of course. Now, it's worth mentioning this order on League of Comic Geeks is always based on how many pulls each book has, and because that's a mini that's just started, it's lower down the list, even though it feels like it should be the one at the top because it's the big start of the new thing. But that's why.
Well, I mean, Batman Catwoman as well.
True, but it's got Batman in the title.
Well, that's fair.
It's still that should be probably the second book there because of that, and it's not. So
yeah,
the point remains.
With this Dark Multiverse one, Wonder Woman: War of the Gods. Are you familiar with which story this is based on?
Not really, no.
No, me either.
We also have Metal Men issue 12, Dreaming Waking Hours 15, Batman the Adventure Continues number 7, and DC Classics The Batman Adventures issue 7. So we actually have a number of big things to cover next week. Endless Winter issue 1 being the main thing.
Yeah, I mean, we've got 2 big Tom King books. We've got a Deceased and Endless Winter starting. I think we'll be okay.
Yes. So that is what's coming next week. So look forward to that. I will take this time to thank our Patreon producers for the month. So thank you to Tyler Hess, Cindy Palacios, David Short, Board Now, Al Treisman, Christopher Moy, Brett Williams and David Brown. They are all patrons at patreon.com/MailFuzzTV at the $20 tier or more specifically. But you can, of course, support us for as little as $1 per month and show your support for the podcast and indeed all the content that we do as MailFuzz TV, which does include movie podcasts and TV episode reviews and stuff like that, which you can find on the MailFuzz TV YouTube channel or on a couple of different podcast feeds, which will be obvious if you go and check them out on YouTube. But yeah, so go and have a look and see if you're interested. Also, if you're on YouTube, hit the like button, subscribe, all those things. It helps a lot, and YouTube will recommend us out a little bit more. So that is the simple and free way to support us, so please do if you can. You can, of course, also get us on Twitter at DC Comics Podcast, which is a good place for updates, but also to ask us questions whenever we need questions and stuff like that. So go and have a look over there too. But otherwise, that is us. So thank you very much for joining us. It has been episode 229 of Comics from the Multiverse. So we go into the 230s next week with a few exciting months of mini events and crossovers before we get to whatever March is going to be. It should make for an exciting winter, if nothing else. So hopefully we'll see you then for that. But that has been us. So thank you once again for watching or listening. We always appreciate it. Keep reading DC Comics. And remember to never get lost in the Speed Force.